The land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the lands of Anishinaabe Nation. This spot where we gather is the traditional land of the Three Fires Confederacy, the Ottawa, Potawatomi, and Ojibwe. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Delaware Nation. This land was settled through the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we, as the beneficiaries of the treaty, must recognize our responsibilities, including our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Mr. Mayor, we do not have a supplementary agenda this evening, and rules for the council chambers. The municipality of Chatham-Kent supports open meetings that welcome debate of public policy issues in an atmosphere of inclusiveness, integrity, civility, fairness, and respect of differing points of view. Anyone conducting themselves in a way that disturbs, disrupts, or impedes the orderly conduct of a meeting, interrupts or makes derogatory statements or hate speech, defamatory comments about councillors, staff, speakers, or fellow members of the public may result in removal from the premises. We ask that you do not approach members of council if they are seated in their council seat around the horseshoe. The use of posters, signage, and literature is also prohibited. Mr. Mayor, we do not have any disclosures of pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, this evening. And we'll move on to recognitions. First, we have the artist feature, and I'll pass it over to Councillor Marjorie Crew.
Thank you, Judy. Yejide, I'm sorry, I'm going to mess this name up. Kilanko was born in Ibadan, Nigeria, and immigrated to Canada in 2004. She is a health quality PhD candidate at Queen's University and lives with her family in Chatham, where she practices as a counselor in children's mental health. Yejide writes poetry, short stories, novels, and children's picture books. Her 2012 debut novel, Daughters Who Walk This Path, is a Canadian national bestseller, along with long-listed for the Nigeria Literature Prize, and is available at the Chatham-Kent Public Library. Her latest novel, In Our Own Ways, and third children's picture book, The Other Side of Small, are coming in the fall of 2024. Yejide's short fiction, This Tangible Thing, was shortlisted for the 2023 Cain Prize and narrates a child's journey of self-realization and self-affirmation. It teaches valuable lessons on the role of culture in therapy. Yejide, would you please share with us a brief excerpt from this story about Ejoke? Thank you.
Okay. Good evening. It's an honor to be here. So today I'm going to be reading from my short story, This Tangible Thing. About 11 years ago, I decided to create a fictional town, and I called it Mapleville. Mapleville is Chatham. It has the Cone and Shake store. It's close to Lake Erie. And so Ajoke and her family, they live in Mapleville. But in this story, Ajoke visits Nigeria and meets her grandmother for the first time. Okay. So 2 days later, NEFA called to let them know that the suitcases were finding in Lagos. No one could explain their detour to Mozambique. He was coming to Igbo-Rumole the next day. Tired out by another village excursion, Ajoke and Bibi Ray both decided on an early night. A chin propped in her hand, Ajoke laid next to Bibi Ray and stared at her face. "Grandma, the lines on your face, they look like the creases in Grandpa's maps." Bibi Ray smiled. "This lines tells plenty of stories." "What kind of stories?" It was hard to sum up a lifetime in a few words. Stories about love, courage, deep secrets, sorrow, wisdom, joy, much joy. "Which line is your favorite?" Ajoke asked. She reached out for Ajoke's hand, brought it close, and traced Ajoke's index finger along the deep laugh line at the left corner of her mouth. "This one. When your father called to tell me you were born, I could not stop laughing." Ajoke's expression sobered. "Grandma?" "Yes, my child." Ajoke gave her a cautious look. Dad said you also stopped talking to people. I did. Why? A familiar choking feeling welled up in her chest. When I was 7, my mother went missing. Ajoke's eyes grew big. Oh, Bibi excelled. Mama used to say I talked too much. Now I know she meant no harm. I told myself that was why she left us, and that if I stopped talking, someone would tell Mama so she could come home. Did your mom come back home? No. Ajoke looked as if she was about to cry. I'm sorry. Grateful, Bibi reached out and stroked Ajoke's face. Inside her 85-year-old body was a 7-year-old who still wanted her mother. How did you start talking again? Ajoke asked. It had been a journey of many months. My father helped. He told me this folk tale I'm about to tell you and said that my voice is a good gift. My child, when something is good for us, we must find a way to tolerate any discomfort. Now, it is time for a folk tale. To Bibi's relief, Ajoke sat up with a brighter face. The child loved hearing folk tales just as much as her father did. Bibi began the story. Their people have always done it. Allo, allo, Ajoke shouted back. One day, many, many years ago, when most animals still walked upright, Alangba Adarikpon, the Agama lizard, looked out of his window, saw that it was a sunny day, and decided to go on a leisure walk. Ajoke gave her a skeptical look. That really happened? Bibi kept a straight face. Child, one does not say that an elder is lying. Ajoke drawled the word. Right. Bibi pursed her lips. Should I continue the story or not? Yes, Grandma. The Agama stroll took him by his friend, Akalamabu's house. Alangba Darikon remembered that he had borrowed a whistle he lent the friendly hornbill. He decided to collect it. Akalamabu opened the door and invited him in. The ant was about to eat his evening meal. The aroma of the spicy pottage set on the raffia mat made Alangba Darikon's mouth water. While his friend went to get the whistle, Alangba Darikon quickly dipped his finger in the bowl of pottage and took a generous amount. His attempt to swallow the scalding hot food without being caught sent the pottage down the wrong way. Ajoke's eyes widened. Alangba Darikon was in serious trouble. Akpalamo returned and found the Agama hopping from one foot to the other. Mystified by his friend's strange behavior, Akalamo asked for an explanation. Unwilling to say what he did, Alangba Darikon stayed silent. As Alangba Darikon's head glowed in a flaming red color, a concerned Akalamabu threw him inside a bucket of cold water. It was too late. The intense heat had destroyed Alangba Darikon's vocal cords. That is why, until this very day, all the Agama lizard can do in response to any question is to nod his head sadly. Grandma, I didn't steal anyone's food, Ajoke said. No, you did not, my child. Our folk tales carry different lessons for different people in different seasons. What is the lesson for me? I want you, Ajoke, Kuku, always to remember that when we stay silent when we should not, we may lose our voices forever. Do you understand what I mean? Ajoke nodded. Like the Agama lizard did. Yes, like the lizard did. Grandma, talking when you're scared can be difficult. It can. And we also have to learn the wisdom of knowing when not to speak. Ajoke gave her a thoughtful look. How do I know that? It is something you will continue to learn for the rest of your life. She gave Ajoke a soft smile. You will speak to your parents and accept their help? Ajoke took her time to think about the request. I will. Bibi pulled her close for a hug. Thank you, my child. Thank you for listening, and thank you for including my voice in today's proceedings. Thank you.
The The next recognition is the municipal budget team. Councillor Brock McGregor.
Thank you. This past year, the Budget and Performance Services team implemented Chatham-Kent's first multi-year budget, and in our ongoing commitment to be open and transparent, efforts have continued to improve the budget documentation provided to both council and the public. These efforts have again been recognized by the Government Finance Officers Association, and I'm pleased to announce the Corporation of the Municipality of Chatham-Kent has received the GFOA's Distinguished Budget Presentation Award for the 2024 to 2027 multi-year budget. In addition to receiving this award, special recognition was given with regards to strategic goals and strategies. Special recognition is given when all reviewers give the highest possible score in particular categories. This award represents a significant achievement for our municipality and reflects the high-quality documents our team prepared in striving to improve budget transparency in our community. Congratulations, Steve Brown, Chris Heaton, Sandra Holmes, Matt Smith, Haley Wilbur, and Ryan Jones for your hard work and countless hours you put into making this possible. Thank you.
We'll now move on to planning services.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The process to be followed for the planning application will be as follows. Number 1, the clerk will announce the planning item. 2, the mayor will ask if there is anyone present other than the applicant with an interest in the application and to indicate so by raising their hand. 3, the clerk will advise if written or video submissions have been received. Number 4, if someone present other than the applicant indicates an interest in the item, there will be a presentation by administration. 5, individuals with an interest in the application other than the applicant will be asked to proceed to this podium, provide their name and address, and address council. 6, the applicant will be asked if they wish to proceed to the podium and address council. 7, administration will be asked if they have any comment based on any discussion that may have occurred. And 8, council will be asked what action it wishes to take regarding the item. Notice, if any specified person under the Planning Act that files an appeal of a decision of council in respect of the proposed applications does not make oral or written submissions to the municipal clerk before the proposal is approved, they are not entitled to appeal a decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal unless in the opinion of the tribunal there are reasonable grounds to add the person or public body as party to the appeal. Information on council's actions tonight will be posted on the municipal website. All persons who have made a request or who have made an oral or written submission regarding a particular planning item will receive a notice of council's decision, including appeal procedures. Any other person who wishes to receive a notice of decision must submit a written request to the municipal clerk. Thank you.
First item for planning, 12A, applications for consent and zoning bylaw amendment, Earl Johnson and Macy Holloway Johnson, 14263 Talbot Trail, Community of Orford, East Kent. Mr. Mayor, we have not received a conflict of interest and there have been no deputations received.
Is there anyone present other than the applicant or the agent with an interest in the application? If so, please indicate by raising your hand. Seeing none, Councillor McDonald and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Yep, happy to do so.
And I will second.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. Mr. Mayor, we'll now move on to the deputations. This evening we have received 9 deputations, 2 via email, 1 via Zoom, and 6 are present this evening. The 2 that were received for email this evening were for item 21B, Building and Land Acquisition, Affordable Housing Chatham, 55 Croydon Street, Chatham. Lisa Series and Michelle Blake submitted emails to council that were sent at noon today. Also present this evening, we have Henry Savek on our Zoom call. Mr. Savek is here to speak on the same item, item 21B, Building and Land Acquisition, Affordable Housing, Chatham, 55 Croydon Street, Chatham. Mr. Savek, you can proceed with your deputation now.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, thanks for taking the time. It'll only take a minute or two. So I'll just start by saying I'm basing this on my 40 years of investing and purchasing. We own properties in Ontario, development properties, as well as office buildings and multi-res in Ontario and Nova Scotia. So I reviewed the appraisals, and they really appeared faulty because of a couple of issues. Both appraisals presented regarding the purchase of the school on Croydon Avenue, in my opinion, were inaccurate, and they really failed to include the property that was purchased, its own property, in 2011 for $31 a square foot, when they used the comps to compare to come up with an appraised value. The current market for properties like this has decreased significantly since 2021, when the charity originally purchased the property. So it was purchased for $635,000, but the majority of properties such as this have dropped drastically throughout the province. The buyer pays for closing costs, and in my 40 years, other than in rare occurrences, that never happens. So as a taxpayer, I'm quite concerned that for some reason someone feels this is policy, that we would pay the closing costs in a transaction in a down market that never happens in the real world. The more appropriate value, in my opinion, and I've talked to a number of people that I've worked with in purchasing and valuing properties such as this, is between $250,000 and $350,000. However, we haven't had a chance, and I may have missed it. I'm sorry if I did, but I didn't see a phase 2 or any type of environmental liability to the taxpayer for this. The final point, which is really important, I think, is an appraisal is never utilized to direct a purchase price to a buyer, regardless of whether it's government or private. It makes no sense. Appraisals have significant value in a number of ways, but not to come up with a price. The correct price is what the market would bear. And I'm still somewhat puzzled to see how in 2 years in a down market, a property purchased for $635,000 is now worth just over $1 million that we should pay. It really is unfortunate. I don't know if it's incompetence or just a missed opportunity, but to purchase this property with the ongoing liability, and in fact, the over-purchasing of this property should be looked into, because it makes no sense on the market today, nor what generally happens in the investment community. I would just finish by saying, I've written a number of checks in my career, and I think if council agrees to do this, they should all think, would they write a check personally for $1 million to purchase this building? Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Mr. Savek. We'll now move on to the deputations in the room. I'll remind all speakers that there is a maximum of 5 minutes, and as you've seen, the timer will be on the screen. First of all, item 17E, the motion of Councillor Carmen McGregor regarding farm tax ratio. We have 2 speakers to that this evening. First is Brad Snoblin, next is Jim Brackett. Hi, Mr. Snoblin. Can you just push the button? The red light should come on. Perfect. Thank you.
Mayor Caniff and council members, the Kent Federation of Agriculture would like to respond to Councillor C. McGregor's motion to increase the farm tax ratio to 25%. It should be noted that this is the maximum allowable by the province of Ontario, but not uniformly accepted or implemented in every municipality across the province. This issue has come to the council floor many times in the last few years, most recently April of 2023. At that time, council made the decision to hold off any changes until the impact assessments were completed, a reasonable decision that was fair to the municipality and ratepayers. It's clear that municipal staff does not respect the decisions the past council has made on the subject, most recently 15 months ago. Nothing has changed since that decision was made. The provincial government has not directed MPAC to do the assessments in the current year. 2025 would be the start of a new cycle, and hopefully these assessments will resume at that point. With no new changes to the impact data, there will be no net change to the municipal tax revenue stream. But such a move would have a significant negative impact on local agriculture and rural communities. As such, there's no justification for making any changes at this time. I hope that council will continue with their decision to hold off any changes to the farm tax ratio until there's information before you that you're able to make a well-informed decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker on the item is Jim Brackett.
Thank you. To the mayor and the Chatham-Kent councilors. I represent the Chatham-Kent Property Owners Incorporated, newly formed 2 years ago farm group. The Chatham-Kent Property Rights would like to address the recent motion to increase farm tax ratio to 23 from 22 by Councilor McGregor, and to take this ratio to 25% by the end of the term, this council's term. It has been suggested that farmers have been doing well lately and should pay more. While property tax is not an income tax, in the last year, commodity prices have dropped 25 to 50%, or you could easily say tanked, and they're at probably a 10 to 15-year low right now. But our expenses have not. They never do. Our expenses are still the same or climbing, including the carbon tax increases, and there has been no rebate for farmers on drying or anything else in terms of the fight that's been going on in terms of carbon taxes. So it's still out there and it's still being paid. The result is narrower margins in the farming industry. This increase, and maybe not even margins, I should say. This increase has been tabled 4 times in the last 5 years, and the council has commented on waiting until the impact numbers are ready. The impact numbers we're based on right now are the 2016 impact numbers, and to this point, I don't know when the next ones are coming out, but it likely will be sooner rather than later. Each time that this has been tabled in the last 5 years, each of the 4 times it's been defeated by council. Thank you. The municipal tax ratio is less than 25% in 18 of the Ontario municipalities. 16 of the 18 are areas with high impact assessments and excellent high value cropland like CK, and returning in real dollars, returning high tax dollars to the municipality. Conversely, many regions are at 25 have much lower valued land and valued assessments, and they produce even lower amounts of real tax dollars. So it's really how much is the farming community paying. So the point that I didn't put in my letter to you all is that we are more than happy to pay our share if for the dollars that we pay in taxes that we're getting that same service back. And we are looking into that through the OFA as well as other farm groups. We recommend deferring any discussion to the farm tax ratio until the next impact, like council has decided in the past. Please consider your food security and the overall health of our vital industry and vote no to this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And the final 4 speakers are on item 21B, Building and Land Acquisition, Affordable Housing, Chatham, at 55 Croydon Street in Chatham. First speaker will be Sheila Martin, followed by Stan Maispa, Clark Schultz, and Janet O'Hara.
Hello. Good evening, Mayor, municipal councilors, and citizens of Chatham-Kent. My name is Sheila Martin, and I live 4 houses from the former St. Agnes School property. I have owned my home for 18 years. I'm speaking to you today to voice my opposition to the municipality purchasing the former St. Agnes School property in Chatham. What is going on with our municipality? CK Admin has asked council for ideas on how to save money, and now they are engaged in senseless spending on an investment property. At times like this, when we've had almost a 23% compounded tax increase in the last 5 years, and we are looking at another 23% tax increase in the next 3 years, CK Admin is asking council to approve an investment purchase of the former St. Agnes School property, where they intend to hold on to it and pay maintenance fees for several years. Why? This is fiscally irresponsible, and the municipality should not be buying property. In fact, the municipality should be divesting of property. We have an incredible amount of expenditures on the horizon that we cannot afford. We need to concentrate on fixing roads and infrastructure. We need repairs to many municipal buildings, including this civic center, that are long overdue. We have the Wheatley gas explosion to pay for and at a potential cost of $7 to $12 million. We have flooding in Tilbury and throughout the municipality, and we have a new walking bridge construction in Wallaceburg that just came in over budget by $500,000. The time for fiscal responsibility is now. Why is the municipality entering into a memorandum of understanding with Indwell? My neighborhood has been fighting for 2 years against Indwell, and we have asked time and time again for your help. How can you turn your backs on us, yet offer to help the Tecumseh Park neighborhood? We are homeowners too. We have worked our entire lives to live in a nice, quiet residential area that it seems like CK, Admin, and Indwell are trying to destroy. In June of 2024, Trevor Jones, MPP of Chatham-Kent Leamington, referred to Indwell's expertise. He said, I quote, "Now we have to work on that neighborhood that enjoyed a peaceful, quiet school there. The collective benefit of all of us is now there's going to be affordable housing." Trevor Jones really needs to do his homework. My neighborhood welcomes affordable housing. We want to see seniors, disabled persons, and women and children living on that property. Indwell is not affordable housing. I repeat, Indwell is not affordable housing. Indwell is transitional housing. It's very different, and it does not belong in a residential area. The people in the homeless shelter will move to an Indwell building. Indwell is very similar to the CK Extended Stay, which was the old Super 8 motel on Missioner Road. And I know homeowners personally in that neighborhood on Vanier Drive. They couldn't let their children play in the front yard, they couldn't walk their dogs after 7 p.m., and they woke up to needles in their front yards. Indwell, in my opinion, is no expert. Indwell is a failure. And if you do a little bit of research on the internet, you can quickly find that out. Just this past January 2024, Indwell's brand new building called The Station in St. Thomas had an explosion. It caused extensive damage to 3 apartments and pushed the walls out of those apartments by 5 inches. Do you really want this for Chatham-Kent? Indwell staff are poorly paid. They're not adequately trained to deal with crisis situations. In fact, Indwell properties frequently have suicides, and one instance where a resident was left dead in an apartment for over a week. The staff member knew about it. They did not report it, and they did not call 911. Indwell properties frequently have the police and ambulance there every day. Indwell is not a good employer. They are not a good landlord, and Indwell staff are not safe. Indwell tenants are not safe, and our neighborhood will not be safe. So please do your homework. Please do what is fair and equitable and right for the citizens of Chatham-Kent and the citizens of my neighborhood. Please vote no to the purchase of the St. Agnes School property, and please vote no to Indwell. My neighborhood is depending on you to represent us. Thank you.
Next speaker is Stan Mazeppa, followed by Clark Schultz.
Which button do I push again?
It's on, it's good.
Oh, it's on, okay.
Yep.
Mr. Mayor, municipal councilors, my name is Stan Mazeppa, CPA, CMA, homeowner on 7 and Ave. Subject is purchase of St. Agnes School, item 21B, building and land acquisition, supportive and affordable housing on 55 Croydon Street. I urge the mayor and councilors not to purchase St. Agnes School nor build a housing facility for the homeless, which will jeopardize the safety of the residents of Stacy's subdivision, plus violate their taxpayers' rights to a peaceful enjoyment of their property under the Civil Rights Act of Ontario. Okay, there's a number of concerns there. The first time that Indwell project was on the agenda, some councilors maliciously voted to have this project in a residential area, while fully cognizant of the concerns of their residents that had in other areas like Dolson Road, Victoria Park Place, Merritt Ave, and other places in Ontario that have these homeless dwellings. There's been a consensus in Ontario not to have homeless shelters near residential areas. In Chatham, I believe I read somewhere that Mr. Sakachi also motioned not to have a homeless shelter near a residential area. This in-well project will house homeless individuals, and homeless individuals who are drug pushers, drug users, and criminally insane. There have been a number of noise violations, assaults, burglaries, theft, break-in entries, trespassing, nuisance calls to the police at all hours of the day and mostly night in all areas of that homeless shelters have been located throughout Ontario. Chatham is a small community, and no other municipality in Ontario accommodates their proposed 94 units as they have for this area. No other municipality has this type of business in the residential area, nor are there three-story buildings in other residential areas. There will be no security guards posted after 1 year, nor will there be anyone around after midnight. Who will bear the onus of the responsibility for injuries to individuals and children by stepping on contaminated needles or other means? Who will be responsible for the litter and other debris scattered around a neighborhood which is contrary to the litter bylaws? This project will devalue properties in our area and cause enormous emotional stress to its residents. There is not one case that in-well has proven that they can wean people off their addiction, but rather they've taken the revenue for their perpetual services that never cure an individual. What's needed is more government-controlled rehabilitation centers and more medical centers for mentally handicapped. This project may be a noble cause, but no one has stepped forward and volunteered to take a homeless person as a boarder, nor have they volunteered to put this project next to their home. Obviously, the federal and provincial governments also found this project unsuitable, or there would have been a funding for it already. Conclusion, as a taxpayer who has paid his property and income taxes all his adult life, and as a professional individual with no criminal record, I do deserve to be heard. In Ontario, property taxpayers have certain rights and responsibilities. The Property and Civil Rights Act of Ontario governs property rights and ensures property owners have the right to a peaceful enjoyment of their property. And I reiterate, peaceful enjoyment of their property. This project will be a breach of that right. And I urge the mayor and councillors to vote no to the purchase of St. Agnes nor building a facility for the homeless there. A councillor has already motioned to that, to not locate a homeless shelter in a residential area, and these in-well dwellings are for the homeless. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker is Clark Schultz. On deck is Janet O'Hara.
Mayor Caniff, council members, I'm Clark Schultz, a resident of the St. Agnes School neighborhood, and my property backs onto the school's playground. This is the second time I have addressed this chamber regarding the establishment of supportive housing at this location. My previous deputation was in regards to in-well developing this location for a 95-unit supportive housing complex. At that time, I spoke in favor of in-well's plan, and I am saddened that they will not be developing a facility at this site. I attended all their open houses, participated in numerous meetings with various in-well staff, and toured their facilities in Woodstock and London. What sold me on in-well was that in all our interactions, it was clear that they were committed to helping their clients not only by providing them affordable accommodation, but also by providing them with the services they need on site to overcome and manage addiction and mental health issues. It was also very clear that in-well wanted to be good neighbors. In touring their facilities, we observed that they worked hard to foster this good neighbor attitude in their tenants. The in-well tenants that I met were happy, and their positive rapport with staff was genuine. The tenants welcomed us, and they took pride in their homes. From my experience with in-well, I recognize that it is possible for a supportive housing complex to be a good fit for a residential area. In contrast, I have seen no plan or strategy as to how the municipal staff intend to manage a supportive housing facility, and that needs to be made public before our municipality invests in any property. What services will the municipality provide on-site? A supportive housing facility that does not have dedicated staff to meet the needs of the tenants will not work. I also reside in the Tecumseh Park neighborhood near the current emergency shelter, where the mental health and addiction counseling services offered are from outside agencies that visit once a week. This will also be the case at the proposed mini cabin location. Residents of the Victoria Park Place shelter tell us that the services provided are inadequate, that the various social service agencies don't have the opportunity to work together as a team, and that is needed. In touring both the Chatham-Kent Emergency Shelter and Indwell's Woodstock facilities, the counseling offices at the shelter were stark and barren, where at Indwell they were warm and inviting, with obvious evidence that they were well-used, personalized spaces. It is not just a matter of decor. There needs to be meaningful, regular, and consistent support taking place on site so that people learn to develop goals, objectives, and plans for making healthy choices. The public needs to know what criteria is used to determine when people are ready to move from the homeless shelter to supportive housing and on to affordable housing. Indwell vets its clients, has expectations they must meet to move through the levels, and they do maintenance checks on their residents to ensure they are following their expectations. Will the municipal staff do the same? What will the municipality be the municipality's way of dealing with residents or their guests who are non-compliant or combative? In the Tecumseh Park neighborhood, we find they are expelled onto the streets, and it becomes our responsibility to call 911 when these people are in medical crisis and a danger to themselves or others. Will there be a committee of council to oversee the management of this facility and provide public input into its operations? A committee of council needs to be created now to aid in developing the municipality's model for supportive housing and before any properties are purchased. As a privately owned organization, Indwell is able to move encampments from their supportive housing properties. Does the municipality have the same discretion should encampments develop at a municipally run housing complex? I am in favor of Chatham-Kent developing supportive and affordable housing. There aren't enough groups like Indwell to meet the need. Even though Indwell has 50 years of experience operating supportive housing, serious issues do occur. I urge council to defer the decision to purchase this property and to work actively with municipal staff on developing a plan as to how this municipality will fund, staff, and manage a supportive housing facility. I hope, too, that residents of any neighborhood hosting a shelter or supportive housing will be included in the plan development, or at the very least informed of the manner in which they will operate. I appreciate the collaborative efforts of Josh Myers, Kim Crew, Allison Story, Mayor Caniff, and members of our police service and fire services in meeting with those of us in the Tecumseh Park neighborhood to talk openly and honestly about how we can manage the issues we face. I hope that this collaborative spirit will continue, that concerned citizens will have an opportunity to work with staff and councilors to develop a plan to provide supportive housing to meet the needs of our citizens. But until there is such a plan in place, I cannot support council purchasing properties to operate supportive housing without meaningful collaboration with all stakeholders involved. Thank you.
Thank you. And last speaker is Janet O'Hara.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. I recommend that the municipality vote no to the purchase of 55 Croydon if it is conditional upon the continued involvement with the Indwell Community Homes. I have concerns with the memorandum of understanding that is mentioned in the motion. Indwell will not only profit significantly from the increase in purchase price from $635,000 to over $1 million of taxpayers' dollars in about 3 years, but as well as having an ongoing role which I have not seen as being demonstrated successfully through most impartial literatures in the regards. My name is Janet O'Hara. I own a residence on Sussex Street and have lived there for over 30 years. I do not live next door, but definitely consider this location part of my neighborhood. I've enjoyed many years of playing baseball at Percy Park and am concerned what impact a substantial influx of individuals in need of supportive housing would have on the remaining neighbors and general community's ability to enjoy that green space at the park. For many years, I've walked and more often biked around the neighborhood with the intent of doing much more of that in my retirement, and wonder if this no longer will be enjoyable or comfortable. I am looking through the lens that I've seen for what some supportive housing projects become within well support. Every meeting I attended since 2021 seemed to increase in size but decrease with the amount of support that InWell is contributing. It started as a 35-unit building with live-in support and was conveyed to being 94 units with community partnership supported by the time it ended. I believe affordable housing is needed in our community and feel it should be neighborhood compatible. I believe a low to medium density residence fits in with this neighborhood as that it currently is. I think there's a significant difference between supportive and affordable housing, and these lines continue to be blurred. I don't believe any InWell supporting housing projects are currently located or belong in a residential area, nor do I feel they belong in this residential area. Please, Mr. Mayor and councilors, I urge you to vote no to purchasing this property as motioned on today's agenda. I do not see the necessary transparency in the relationship between InWell, the council, and the neighborhood. After voting last time, more than one councilor stated they didn't realize that the project had jumped to 94 units. Please consider the impact of this project on the entire neighborhood, especially given the memorandum of understanding, which has not been shared at this time. It is hard to make informed decisions for anyone when not all the information is provided. I believe there may be more questions that not only need to be asked, but answered. Therefore, I do not understand the necessity to decide this tonight. Thank you for your consideration in this matter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We'll now move on to the consent agenda. This evening we have, 8 items that have been pulled. The first one being 16B, the contract amendment, contract T23-217, LO Stonehouse Memorial Walk Bridge rehabilitation has been pulled by Councillor Jubenville. Item 16D, tender award contract T23-312, Goulet Ramelier Drain, East Branch and Large Drain Construction and Improvements, pulled by Councillor Harrigan. Item 17A, the 2023 audited financial statements. There will be a presentation by administration. 17B, 2023 final operations variance, pulled by Councillor Sakachi, Councillor Story, and Councillor Brock McGregor. Item 17C, the April 2024 budget variance forecast, pulled by Councillor Story. Item 17E, motion of Councillor Carmen McGregor regarding farm tax ratio, pulled by Councillor Carmen McGregor and Councillor Jubenville. Item 19B, motion of Councillor Hall regarding additional lighting over downtown Wallaceburg sidewalks, pulled by Councillor Hall, Councillor Doyle, and Councillor Sakachi. Item 21B, building and land acquisition, affordable housing Chatham, 55 Croydon Street in Chatham, pulled by Councillor Bondi, Councillor Doyle, Councillor Story, and Councillor Jubenville. Therefore, the following reports are in the consent agenda and will be approved with one motion. Item 15A, B, C. Item 16A, C, E, F, G, H. Item 17D. Item 18A, 19A, 20A, 21A, and 22A, B, C, D, and E.
Councillor Finn and Councillor Anderson, can I get you to move the consent agenda, please?
Happy to move it.
And so seconded.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 16, tender awards.
16B, contract amendment, contract T23-217, LO Stonehouse Memorial Walk Bridge rehabilitation.
Councillor C. McGregor and Councillor Hall, can I get you to put this on the floor, please?
Happy to.
So seconded.
Councillor Juvenile, you had some questions?
Thank you, Mayor. Basically, just a quick question. Since I've been on council, this is the second time that something of this magnitude has happened, that we've gotten to a financial situation that something has been over budgeted. So how do we prevent this from happening in the future? Is there any protection that we can have so that these kind of things don't happen again? $500,000 is a lot of money.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll answer that question. Will refer council to the report in terms of page 38. These really are a number of things that were unexpected. So in the report, we do speak to the various deficiencies that were found that were really unknown when we actually put the tender out itself. So this is a very old bridge. And when you start to rehab a very old bridge, you're always going to find things that are going to be unexpected. We did have a contingency in here to deal with those, but these were greater than our contingency that we had. So in particular, there was a lot of deterioration of the steel. Once you remove the coating, you start to discover that. Just like in your own home, when you start to paint, you start to find all sorts of little deficiencies that you maybe not have anticipated. So normally we would have a contingency that would cover any unexpected fines that we would have, but in this case here, they were quite substantial, and they were really at the tail end of the project itself, and there we're up against the barrier of both timing in terms of navigable waters, as well as some other timing related to the event that occurred on the weekend, so we needed to get this done. We would normally come to council for approval, but for us to stop this project, we would have incurred significantly more costs to come back to council, update council, and then go back out and start the project up again. We would not have finished this year, quite frankly. If we demobilized off this site with all the cranes and everything else, the cost would have been substantial. So to answer your particular question, Councillor, how do we stop this in the future? We do the best we can through the engineering of the work itself, and we try to have a contingency, but this was an abnormal situation.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I walked across it this weekend at the event, so it was nice. I'm sure the people of Wallaceburg appreciate it. It's just unfortunate that it laid out this way, but that's all. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 16D, Tender Award Contract T23-312, Goulet and Ramelier Drain, East Branch, and Large Drain Construction and Improvements.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Anderson, can I get you put on the floor, please?
So moved, Mayor Caniff.
And seconded.
Councillor Harrigan.
Great, thank you. I actually just pulled this tender for a very quick question around the project timing. Appreciated in the report that there was a note about engaging with the landowners that would be impacted by the drain, but I did have a constituent ask if anyone could speak around the timing of the project through the mayor, I believe, to Edward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the councillor, thanks for the question. This project has been, will be awarded with the council's approval tonight. And really, next steps are, as you indicated, we need to have a pre-construction meeting with both the contractor, the consultant, and the landowners. It is a municipal drain, so while part of it is on the right-of-way, there is also parts of it that would be on private land. We need to have those discussions. I would say that this project will probably start sometime in mid-September after that consultation and execution of documents. And then I would say that it would mostly be substantially done by November. There might be some restoration work that we required in the early spring to deal with grass and things like that. So we see most of the work being done this fall.
Wonderful, thank you very much.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Item 17, Finance, Budget, Information, Technology, and Transformation.
17A, 2023 Audited Financial Statements. We have a presentation by Brock Priddle, Manager of Corporate Accounting.
Good evening. My name is Brock Priddle. I'm the manager of corporate accounting. Tonight I'll be providing a brief presentation on our 2023 audited financial statements. 2023 was the second year of our 5-year audit contract with MNP. Chatham-Kent received an unqualified audit opinion, meaning that MNP has concluded that our financial statements present fairly the results of Chatham-Kent's operations and its financial position according to generally accepted accounting principles. During tonight's presentation, I'll provide a brief overview and items of interest on our financial statements, including debt, reserves, accrual versus cash accounting, our financial position, asset retirement obligations, or AROs, and then our CFO, Gord Quinton, will be providing some comments. Chatham-Kent's consolidated financial statements consist of 5 fully consolidated boards and commissions, including the Library, Police, Public Utilities Commission, Public Health, Drainage, along with 1 government business entity, which is Integris Incorporated. In accordance with public sector accounting standards, the consolidated financial statements must include the following 4 statements. The statement of financial position, also known as the balance sheet, includes a listing of the municipality's assets, liabilities, and accumulated surplus. The statement of operations and accumulated surplus, commonly referred to as an income statement, is comprised of Chatham-Kent's revenues and expenses. The statement of changes in net financial assets includes capital asset transactions as well as changes in other financial assets. And finally, the statement of cash flows, which is simply a record of our sources and uses of cash. We've highlighted the following items of interest on our financial statements. In 2023, we purchased $10 million of fixed income GICs and $20 million of principally guaranteed equity-backed notes. The result of this is a $30 million increase in our investments. There was a $12.2 million increase in provincial funding, which is primarily attributable to $6.8 million in Wheatley gas leak emergency funding and $1.8 million in police grants. Lastly, our debt decreased by $9.6 million, which I will discuss over the next few slides. The municipality's outstanding long-term debt totals $28.8 million. $17.5 million is related to Public Utilities Commission, and these debt payments are funded through water and sewer rates. $5.1 million is covered by senior government funding, which leaves $6.2 million to be funded by the general tax base. This equates to roughly $60 of tax-funded debt per resident of Chatham-Kent. As shown in this graph, the municipality continues to aggressively pay down our debt, reducing our debt load from $161 million in 2010 to just $28 million in 2023. If the municipality does not incur any new debt, this will be further reduced to $19 million by the end of 2024. The Public Utilities Commission's debt is represented in blue, and it has decreased from $89 million in 2010 to $17 million in 2023. Municipal general tax base and other senior government funded debts represented on the graph in green have decreased from $72 million in 2010 to $11 million in 2023. This graph depicts the trend in our reserve balances. It is reflective of our net contributions to reserves, which are the contributions into reserves less the use of those reserves. In 2023, our reserves continued to grow, increasing our reserve to debt ratio to 10.5 to 1, meaning for every $1 of debt, we have $10.50 in reserves. This is up from a ratio of 0.4 to 1 in 2010. In 2023, our reserves increased by $25 million, and our operating expenses increased by $21 million. As a result, our total reserves as a percentage of expenses increased from 70% in 2022 to 73% in 2023. This financial indicator shows us how much money we have set aside to meet our future needs. The increase in reserves can be used to assist council with meeting their strategic objectives and provide the ability to fund capital projects while incurring little to no further debt. For this financial indicator, anything above 20% is considered low risk. As per public sector accounting standards, Chatham-Kent needs to present our financial statements on an accrual basis. This slide displays the reconciliation from an accrual surplus to a cash surplus. As an example, on an accrual basis, amortization of capital assets is recorded as an expense, where on a cash basis, amortization is not a cash outlay, and the cash outlay is at the time when the capital asset is purchased. Chatham-Kent's annual budget is prepared on a cash basis, as we're concerned with the amount of money we receive and how we intend to spend those funds in the year. Our financial statements, conversely, are prepared on an accrual basis to ensure we are in compliance with the aforementioned standards. The municipality's 2023 cash surplus of $2.1 million is primarily attributable to Wheatley gas leak emergency grants received from the province. Net financial assets is measured as financial assets less total liabilities. A positive net financial asset number indicates the amount of resources available for future needs. A negative number, or net debt, would indicate the amount of future revenue that is required to pay for past spending decisions. Our $309 million net asset position indicates that our assets exceed our liabilities, and hence our past transactions are not negatively impacting our future revenue requirements. This is increased by $35 million from 2022. This graph highlights the trend of Chatham-Kent's net financial position. Chatham-Kent was in a net debt position prior to 2014, and as you can see, it has improved to a strong net financial asset position, increasing by $378 million since 2010. Chatham-Kent was mandated to adopt a new public sector accounting standard in 2023 related to asset retirement obligations, or AROs. KPMG provided consulting services on AROs, and our staff worked with them to determine the assets within scope of this new standard. Through this process, we identified 235 building assets with a high probability of asbestos contamination. The liability associated with the future remediation and disposal of this hazardous material was determined to be $25.2 million. And with that, I'll hand it over to Gord for some comments.
Thank you, Brock. Good evening, Council. First, thanks, Brock, to you and your team for all the efforts that was put into getting our financial statements audited this year. And just congratulations to the whole team. I wanted to make a few general comments on our balance sheet because as Brock's been showing you in all the trend lines that he showed you there, Chatham-Kent is in an excellent financial position right now. And I thank all the councils through the years for their efforts of getting to this place. I remember a day where we were in a negative financial position and we're on warning lists from the province to get our act in order. So it's great to see this change. However, I wanted to inform council on what I see happening in the next 5 years or the next decade. We have a lot of old assets in Chatham-Kent, both below ground and above ground, at a higher age than most municipalities in Ontario. And from the master plans that we're looking at, I can see the need for $500 million of debt needing to be issued by Chatham-Kent and Chatham-Kent PUC over the next 5 years. 3/4 of that debt will be on the PUC, but as you understand, the PUC is incorporated into our financial statements. So when you saw reserve balances tonight too, that included the PUC's reserves, which have been increasing over the last few years as they prepare for this onslaught of some major capital works coming their way. Recently, the PUC master plan was finalized earlier this year, and there's just a lot of work that needs to be done over the next decade. On the municipal side, there are also plenty of reasons why debentures make sense. On tonight's agenda, you'll see a couple of affordable housing projects, and there are many more in the works, as this is one of the highest priorities of this council's term. But we're not making today's residents pay for it all at once. We debenture the capital costs to spread that over multiple generations. We've also received the fire master plan, and the financial details will be coming over the next year, but there is a substantial capital component in that plan that will need debt financing. And administration will also be bringing several growth-related projects to council over the next year that will require debt financing. And for 2 decades, there's been many discussions on future sports and entertainment center to replace Memorial Arena as it's at its end of life. I'm not predicting the future here. I'm not sure what council is going to want, but if they do want a new facility, it will require a large debt component there as well. Our industrial parks are being filled, and we'll have to look into replacing them and servicing that land. And we already brought several reports over the last year. The cabin project, radio system replacement, and other smaller projects that need to have the costs spread over the time by the use of debt. Debentures spread the cost over multiple generations that enjoy the service instead of putting the capital costs just on the current taxpayer. And debt should be used for the new things, new projects, and not for replacing life cycle roads and bridges of what's already here. There we use a pay-as-you-go model, and we use our life cycle reserves to cushion the ups and downs of the annual needs. We do not use debentures for operating costs. We're not allowed to. In the multi-year budget, council approved in principle a 2025 tax increase of 8.18% for 3 reasons. About 2% of that's operations, about 3% for infrastructure, and just over 3% is for the social costs that likely should be covered by upper level governments. For example, the homelessness, housing, increased policing, security. And in today's budget, we have a very little amount for debt payments. As we've seen in Brock's charts, we've mostly paid off our debt. As we do issue this debt, we will have to find room in the operating budget for that increased annual debt payments over the debenture terms. And as I said, 3/4 of this debt is likely to PUC related and will involve water and wastewater rates needing to be raised, but also the sources of development charges and hopefully upper level grants to help cushion that blow. So in summary tonight, yes, Chatham-Kent has an excellent balance sheet and all the trends are in the right direction, but that's going to change soon. And I just thought it was important to mention that in light of how our current balance sheet is. And Mr. Mayor, we are happy to take any questions either on the financial statements or on the comments that I've made.
Councillor Story.
Thank you very much, Brock and Gord. That's very informative and helpful. You sort of had us, you were raising us up and getting us really excited, and then you sort of tempered it off at the end there. But that's your job. So thank you for giving us a very clear picture of what we face in the coming years. I think one issue or one item that we get a lot of questions about are the unseen. I think you mentioned them as underground. There's a lot of projects that we see every day in our communities that are visible, but they're, I think, what a lot of us, and I've learned a huge amount in just the last 2 years on council about the underground infrastructure and the costs that they incur and that are likely coming up sooner than later. Could you maybe give us a little more detail on what you mean by that?
Yeah, specifically, I already mentioned the PUC with aging water and wastewater systems. That is the underground pipes down every road, but it's also the plants themselves. Wallaceburg plant we know is close to the end of its life, but Chatham and other plants will have capacity issues in upcoming years as well that will need future expansions. But we also talk, sewer separation projects, stormwater projects, where there's high deficiencies in some areas and they experience constant flooding. Residents experience the constant flooding. All that is very costly things to build. When you go under, it's one thing to build a building up above ground, but to go underground, the cost is huge for those assets, and it's for new things added here. I think it's very appropriate that debentures are used.
Thank you. And would you say that water treatment plants and addressing stormwater and wastewater management would be a must-do versus a nice-to-do? We often use those terms around the horseshoe, but those to me, I certainly know how I would approach those. But those aren't really going to be negotiable projects when they come to the horseshoe, correct?
It really comes down to council and the PUC Commission, which is members of council, measuring out what has to be done in the short term versus what can be extended out into the future. But the bills are coming and they just get higher, I guess, is if some of these problems we just have to address, and putting in most of these costs, we have the asset management plan update coming this fall, but most of these costs really have doubled over the last decade and likely will double again over the next decade. And so this gets putting off doesn't mean it's going to save anyone money in the long term. The use of debentures at least spreads it over that 20-year period.
Right. Thank you very much for that.
Councillor Harrigan and Councillor McGrail, can I get you to move this, please?
I'm happy to move, Mayor Caniff, and first I just want to echo Gord's comments to congratulate Gord, Brock, Matt, and the team on behalf of the Audit Committee. I do want to share as well that during our Audit Committee meetings, our finance team and our staff were applauded for how wonderful they were to work with the auditors, so I do appreciate the effort that went into that, and happy to move that. Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
Councillor McGrail?
And I will second.
Any other questions? Seeing none, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. 17B, 2023 Final Operations Variance.
Councillor Scotchy?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'd like to move that the final 2023 operating surplus of $2.11 million be allocated as follows, with the intent of funding some upcoming one-time costs associated with the current housing crisis with one-time surplus funds from 2023 in an effort to reduce the future tax impact to taxpayers for the remaining term of this council. Reserve for the police service issues, $94,610. The Bloomfield Business Park unfunded capital projects for $500,000, and the reserve for affordable housing at $1,516,519. And if I get a seconder, I will just summarize my alternative motion quickly.
Councillor Anderson?
Yep, I'm happy to second that.
Thanks, Mayor Caniff. I just wanted to speak on this very, very briefly. We all know that there's going to be a lot of affordable housing. Ray's got a lot of irons in the fire, so to speak, right now, and there's going to be a lot of financial challenges upcoming here when it comes to affordable housing. What I didn't want to see is the challenging year last year as well as a challenging year this year. Us funds going into sitting into a reserve for a lengthy time. This is very diligent in addressing that it's going to be utilized in this term of council, and we know that there's going to be significant funds that are coming, going to be requested. So I think it's a way to support our taxpayers, and it's a way to utilize that money in a timely manner. And I just wanted to touch base on the council as well, that I had multiple conversations with Mr. Quinton on several different aspects, and this was one that we spoke about this morning. And happy to speak at the end if required, but thank you for the time.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you. I had some initial, just more general questions, not so much related to Councillor Sakatchi's modified recommendations. So I know that this same discussion is happening in some other municipalities. London, to be specific, is talking about, if they can use their variance to lower their tax rate. for example. And I'm sure I've asked this question a dozen or so times in the past few years. And I just wondered maybe if we could have a comment on the use of one-time funds versus the change in operating funds and how that impacts our abilities to lower tax burden. So, for example, if we have a $2 million variance and we said we're going to put that all towards lowering taxes next year, or if we got a $2 million one-time grant or sold an asset for $2 million, how does that affect taxes versus if we change a service that's a $2 million annual savings? So that's really the concept I'm trying to ask a question about for the 10 or 12th time in the last little bit.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So one-time funding is really just that, it's one time. So if we have a $2 million surplus, if you were to offset the 2025 budget by that $2 million, what that's doing is effectively pushing it back into the next budget. So that $2 million would be added back to the 2026 budget because you're buying off base items with one time. If you were to reduce a service, a base reduction would be a base reduction. That service would be eliminated, and that's really the difference. So when you're looking at using surplus to be able to offset future years' budgets, that's just a temporary buy down. It does come back in a future year for you to have to pay that back.
Yeah, I think that's helpful to hear when we're debating how we deal with surpluses or how we deal with one-time expenses. I know there's always a tendency to look at that dollar figure and think that we can reduce a tax impact, but unless you're going to change something forever on an annual basis, you really can't reduce that tax impact. You're just kicking those dollars down the road and increasing future tax increases. So I hope that when we talk about these publicly and look at those types of numbers, we're really cognizant of how we discuss how you can use savings, what type of savings that we're finding, and how those impact the budget process. Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Similar to Councillor B. McGregor, I had comments on the report in general versus the motion, the new motion. Is that okay to continue that discussion? Okay, thanks. I noticed, thank you for that, Steve, there was a fair bit in this report about the Wheatley emergency, and something that, you know, we have talked about numerous times at this council table, and something that I believe wholeheartedly we need to continue to support and address. I think there are some large numbers that you mentioned that for this past year and that perhaps in the coming years. So just to get our heads around what we might be facing going forward, you mentioned, just so I'm clear on how it was written in the report, you mentioned that we received $10.6 million from the provincial government. Thank you to the province for that. And we had expenses of $8.3 million just last year. So does this mean that we are $2.3 million short? Essentially, that's what the taxpayer is covering, or was that $10.6 million covering everything that was needed?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the $10.6 million that we received exceeded what we had in expenses for 2023.
Okay.
With that being said, we did have substantial expenses over the past several years that we were able to cover primarily through variance. And then we also, in 2022, had a deficit that was directly resulted from the Wheatley emergency, and this funding helped offset that deficit. So we were able to pay back what we borrowed from the reserve in 2023 from our 2022 deficit.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know. The $4.418 million listed in the chart on page 5 regarding public works, do you know how much of that was related to that? You don't mention the breakdown of it?
So of the 4.18 million it was, I believe, or 4.418 million, that was all of IES, not just Public Works. And of that, there was about 3.8 million that was directly related to Wheatley.
Okay, so that's the majority. Do we anticipate those same types of numbers for the Wheatley emergency in 2025? Or I guess 2024, we were talking about 2023 variance.
I think that depends. I might ask Gord to weigh in on this one. I think it really depends on sort of what they find over the next several months. But Gord?
Mr. Mayor, quickly, what we're spending this year was, in 2024, to date, has been the purchase of the buildings, of which the province has only, at this point, committed $3 million to go against, but they're still at the table and likely will fund more. I think I can safely say likely. It's not for sure though. And now we're this fall we're going into the so we bought the buildings. We now demolished the buildings. That was the second stage, and now we're through Ryan Brown's team are doing the investigations stage this September and October. And depending what's found underground, off the top of my head, the quotes were around a couple million if things go well, and up to $6 million if things if wells are found that need to be capped and stuff under that. So we are in constant communication with the province from that. They understand the need. I expect that, I'm not saying we'll be made whole entirely, but I'm expecting that most of the expenses will be covered by the province in the end. Right now, they're just holding on to see what we see and to make that decision before their March 31st year end on what they can fund. March 31st, 2025.
Thank you, Gord. And I bring that up not to single it out, more the opposite, just to let folks in the general public know that we do have these expenses that, you know, we need to support, and I fully support continuing to make sure Wheatley is made whole again, because it's something that they deserve, and you know, it's just such a devastating situation. But it's also very expensive, and I want to make sure that as we talk about the context of other costs that come to this table, that we remember that we owe Wheatley these repairs and bringing them back to life. So thank you for that. The next section on building permits. You mentioned, it was, sorry, I'm just pulling back my wording here. In 2023, building permit budget exceeded activity. Does that mean we did not have as many building permits as we thought we would last year? Is that, or how, am I reading that correctly?
So the actual revenue received for building permits was less than we had budgeted, which means that we drew down from the reserve. So it was slightly under budget. The revenue was slightly under budget, so we had to draw from reserve, so it was less than we would have expected.
So is it, to build on that, does that mean we just didn't have as many building permits as we thought we would? Is that safe to say?
Primarily, I would say yes. If we didn't meet the revenue that we had projected, then we didn't have as many building permits.
Okay. Do we, and I know this a few of my questions overlap into the 17C, but do we project that same difference in 2024?
We're projecting a balanced budget for the building permit so that the revenues will equal expenses.
Okay. Thank you very much.
But can I add to that? So just to put some more context on that, so while we're a little bit less in terms of how many building permits we thought we were going to issue, we still had an ample enough reserve in the building department that you may recall we actually reduced the fees. The building department reserve can only be used for building department related costs, so it couldn't be transferred to other areas. So one of the things that we did with council's approval to create more economic activity is to actually reduce the fees across the board. I don't remember exactly, some fees were reduced as much as 50%, some a little less, some a little bit more. So we'll come back probably in 18 months or so, actually probably 6 months, and then again in 18 months to give you an idea of how that actually impacted our building permits. But just to be clear, we're not, we don't have any financial issues when it comes to our building department. We have plenty of money there, and that's why we're able to offer these incentives to our building community.
Thank you for that context. I appreciate it.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much. I guess my first question, and these kind of bleed over between the original recommendation and the new one before, is what are our reserve levels like for the tax rate stabilization, the CK affordable housing, and the strategic development currently?
So for the, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So the reserve for the tax rate stabilization, we put a 0.2, I believe, in the budget in 2025. However, with the contracts and everything that's come in, that will not have anything left. Luckily, in the past, we did have a surplus, I believe, in 2021 when we developed or we implemented this reserve, and we put 500,000 at that point in the reserve. So that's really what our one-time balance is in that reserve currently. As relates to the strategic development reserve, Gord, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe this is about 4.7 million of uncommitted. And then I don't have offhand the affordable housing reserve.
Okay, that's fine. Honestly, I'm glad 2 out of 3 ain't bad, as they say. The Bloomfield Business Park, we're not incurring interest on that 5.53 million. That's just an accounting exercise, right?
Correct. So the Bloomfield Business Park, it's an unfunded debt that we have on our balance sheet.
Okay, so in theory, council could decide to strike that away with a stroke of a pen, couldn't we? That we're just never going to deal with it.
It would always be on our balance sheet.
It would be on our balance sheet, but as it's stated in a Bloomfield Business Park unfunded capital project, we could delete that and it just goes into all the other unfunded capital stuff we have.
Yes, however, we don't really have much else of unfunded capital. This is the primary thing, and we've been trying to address it through these reports at the year end by putting the 500,000 when we have a surplus, which was a council approved motion previously. And then also any sales that come from that land, and that goes against the...
Right, but I guess ultimately what I'm getting at is the 500 grand, where does it go? It goes into the capital budget, right?
It goes onto our balance sheet, basically.
Okay, thank you. I guess my only other question is, and I don't quite understand it, to be honest with you. How does this motion change our budget? I see it as altering where our reserves go, but it doesn't impact the potential tax increase for next year.
It could have potential on the tax impact. So, for example, Ray has several reports tonight, and there'd be more to come, and that could be included in the budget to be able to fund one time through that exercise. So I think it's one way or another, it's about the same, to be honest. But it does, either of these have the potential to impact either next year's or future tax increases.
You're going to have to do a better job of explaining that to me. I'm sorry.
So I'll use, let's say, Ray's example tonight that he has on with affordable housing. It's roughly $1 million that we have to put if council were to approve that purchase. If we were not to have that funding source, we'd have to increase taxes for that. So as Ray has numerous items that he's been pursuing over the last several years and in future years, at some point we're going to run out of money in that reserve, and we're going to have to come to council through budget and look to increase that reserve, either as a one-time or as a base.
Sure, but if we're moving money around, aren't we just going to have to potentially increase those other reserves? I'm really not understanding how altering reserves changes our tax impact.
Gord, did you have something to add?
Yeah, it's just over this term of council, we know affordable housing builds are a couple on tonight, there's some on tonight's agenda, but there's others coming where we have to borrow the difference and then raise taxes to pay for those debt debenture payments over the next 20 years. By having the more money we can squirrel away in reserves today to be able to take off the top of those costs, the less we'll have to debenture on our taxpayers in the future. So if I use Westcourt example that we'll be talking about later tonight, we don't know the math on Westcourt yet for multiple reasons. We're hoping for federal grants. We're hoping for provincial fund, all types of sources of funding that Ray will outline. But the bottom line is that there's still going to be $5 million. I'm just pulling a, depends on the grants, but there's going to be an amount that Chatham-Kent taxpayers have to come up with. by having a $1.5 million in the affordable housing reserve, that we can knock off that. Now we only have to borrow $3.5 million, and spread those costs over the remaining 20 years. So we'll be able to bring in lower tax ask. It's that types of things. I'm not saying it's going to that project because there's a lot. We'll have recommendations in the budget in the 2025 and 2026 updates about where exactly that would go. But we're trying to lessen the affordable housing impacts to as tax increases that are needed over the next couple of years.
Okay, Gord, to you. And I'm not sure I like this setup where I can't see the guy who's talking to me, truth be told. It's not bad for you folks over there, but it's odd for us here. Yeah, thank you. The only other question, and I asked it before, is since we're not throwing $500,000 into the reserve for tax rate stabilization here, there is always the potential you're going to ask for another $500,000 when it comes to our next go-around on the multi-year budget, is there not?
So what we're really saying, in a way, whether this went to the tax rate stabilization reserve and additional requests come to council for affordable housing, or whether it goes to the affordable housing reserve, which we can now reduce those requests, in the end, over the many years of, as these builds are built, it actually makes no difference. We're returning $2 million of one-time money, or 1.5 after the other two are looked after. We're returning $1.5 million of one-time money that will benefit our future budgets. So it's being given back to the taxpayer by them not having to raise future taxes as high to pay for those projects. It all comes, I think it was Councillor Brock McGregor who just mentioned about cutting service, cut space dollars, but this is when we talk about affordable housing, this is in council's strategic plan priorities to increase the level of service for affordable housing by a pretty drastic amount over the next 5 years. So it is going to require more funding as we go, and this will lower that future impact to taxpayers.
Okay, thanks, Gord.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 16-0. 17C, April 2024 Budget Variance Forecast.
Councillor Story and Councillor B. McGregor, can I get you on the floor, please?
Happy to move, Mr. Chair.
So seconded.
Councillor Story, you had some questions? I know you had got a few of them answered, the last one.
I think I had about 99% of them answered, so maybe I'll just ask the question specific to this report. I know you mentioned that we would normally receive an April variance, but we're not going to this time around because of some staffing pressures. Do you feel that will be resolved soon and we'll be receiving this information relatively in a reasonable time frame?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So yes, the staffing issues the staffing pressures we had were all one time. Those have been dealt with. So typically you'd be receiving the April variance in late June or the meeting in July. And then also, just to your, I think another question was, what other variances do we have? And so there would be the August variance too, and that normally would come to council prior to budget deliberations so that you have the most up-to-date information.
So we'll have at least one variance before budget, or one more variance report before budget?
That'd be correct.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no other questions, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0. Final report in this section, 17E, motion by Councillor C. McGregor regarding farm tax ratio.
Councillor C. McGregor and Councillor Harrigan, can I get you put on the floor, please?
Certainly.
So moved. I do have a friendly amendment when it's my turn to speak.
Okay. Counselor C. McGregor?
Would you like me to read that motion, or is everybody good just with me going into the explanation?
It is handy for the public, but if instead of the
Okay.
whereases, you could just read what's on the screen.
Yes, okay. What's okay on the screen compared to what's on my notes here? That administration bring a report to council on September 23rd, 2024, with a recommendation to phase in over the remainder of the term of council the farm tax ratio back to the normal province-wide rate of 25% of the residential rate as described in section 308.1 bracket 3 of the Municipal Act 2001, and further that the equivalent amount of the taxation shift be invested in the asset management plan for rural infrastructure in 2025 and 2026. The report will provide information on farm tax ratios in the highest 10 farm assessment regions of Ontario, and administration is directed to circulate the report to KFA and Christian Farmers Association in advance of the council meeting. Shall I go ahead before she puts her amendment in, or?
Would you like to hear it, and then you can talk to that as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Counselor Harrigan?
Thank you. I would just like to add in the line of administrative is directed, something along the lines of like to create an engagement plan with the agricultural community, just so that we can ensure that there is engagement done with the community in advance of the report. And then perhaps that might change the specific September date to just say fall of 2024 as a result of adding in some extra engagement.
Is that a friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay. While we're adding this, maybe I'll go to you, Counselor C. McGregor, and you can continue on.
Thank you. Thank you. The reason I'm bringing these back, and I guess first I'd like to start and thank the people that reached out to me and for the delegations made tonight, and speak to that a little bit. I've given a great deal of thought to this, and I actually went back and have viewed the previous meetings and the discussion around the table with the councillors and re-listen to the delegations that came to council in the past. So I know since 2021 it's come to this council table 4 times. March of 21, which it was turned down. May 9th of 22 was actually withdrawn and was not then discussed at council. April 3rd, 2023 and April 24th, 2023 stemmed from one related one. So actually, there's been really 2 major discussions since 2021 around the table about the farm tax ratio. So I think, and what I really picked up in the last discussion around this table with this council was that the need for consultation in the community if we're going to do this. That it was very difficult last time it came in April, and we were at a point within weeks that we had to bring a budget policy decision moving forward. So there certainly was not enough time to be able to talk with the community and to do any of that consultation. So I think that is very important, hence why I've brought it back at this point. I know it's only a year and a half ago that we did this, but I think with doing it in the fall, there's ample amount of time to be able to have these discussions before the spring. In my motion, and as directly, and even in our delegations tonight, it was mentioned that they'd be more than willing to pay if the investment was going back into their properties. Well, my motion brings back the opportunity to take the monies that over increase, and I know that this will balance out if it's 25% of the tax ratio compared to residential, but the additional monies in my motion, the intent is for it to be put back into rural infrastructure. We all know the costs and the funding and the problems that we have with rural infrastructure. This is one way that we can dedicate more money into improving and working with the rural infrastructure needs that take place within Chatham-Kent. Do we need to be lobbying further and pushing forward, definitely. We need support on this. So much of this was put back into the laps of the municipal tax budgets 20 years ago when not necessarily just amalgamation, because I think a lot of that and the decline in a lot of the switchover where it was turned back over to municipal responsibility was just after amalgamation. But since that period of time, we've been struggling with our low-density population and trying to meet our infrastructure needs. I'm trying to be maybe thinking a little bit out of the box and being a little more creative here on how we can actually get some more money back into the rural infrastructure so that this increase or these increases would actually turn around and benefit the rural community. I think it says it all there, and at this point, I'm simply asking for a report to come back. I think there's a great deal of information that's already been created from administration, from previous reports, that shouldn't make it too difficult to come back. And, even if at that point we move on from consultation after that, or whether we can do consultation before that, I'll leave that to administration to decide how that needs to work. But I hope you'll support this. I think, and I guess the one other thing I did hear from Councillor Brock McGregor, our budget chair in the last time, is this something we should be reviewing annually regardless of the outcome of this. We should be discussing this on a regular basis. And it's been a year and a half. So I hope I have your support tonight that we can then have this report brought back to council.
Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Jumbill.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. And I just wanted to thank Councillor McGregor for incorporating some of the amendments that I had put forward. I also will say that I was surprised at the smaller amount of feedback I had from rural residents in my ward about this motion. And so I think incorporating some engagement baked into the report and then also distributing the report to the KFA and Christers Farmers Association, I think there maybe are a couple other organized groups that would benefit from that distribution as well ahead of the meeting will allow for a robust plan. Initially, I was opposed to the idea because I thought it was just talking about kind of the tax ratios and how we are going to divvy up the tax ratios. And I had sent a note to our clerk kind of talking about how we had spoken about that in the past. But after speaking with Councillor McGregor, I really saw this now as getting a report to help us understand really how it is that we can plan to pay for rural infrastructure needs alongside all of the other infrastructure needs that we have as a municipality. I think our CFO's comments earlier today around, we don't take debentures out to handle asset management. That's not what we should be doing as a best practice. So we really need to think about how we fund life cycle out of the tax base. And so this report will give us some food for thought ahead of our next budget deliberations. So thank you.
Councillor Jumbill, followed by Councillor McGrail.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to ask a question actually on something that Councillor McGregor said. So if this passes and obviously there's an influx in the tax income, can we actually designate whatever that variance would be from what it would be to what it will be? Can we actually designate that to rural infrastructure? Is there a tool in the toolbox to actually do that?
Gord, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're getting into some of the details that will be provided in the report that we plan on bringing if this was to approve, but we know in the multi-year budget that council approved in principle, there were increases every year to our asset management plan. There are increased costs in the rural area, whether it's the paved roads, gravel roads, the gravel along the side of paved roads, bridges. All those costs have come up when the asset management plans are coming to council this fall. You'll see where that gap is. There's lots. So my point is, there's lots of room to allocate to rural areas as part of the shift. Of course, it's as a whole, it's revenue neutral to the municipality. It's just who's paying the bill between the farm, residential, commercial, and industrial classes.
Okay, thank you. After speaking to some of our farmer friends, I realized their crop prices are down. They're nowhere near the commodity prices that they were. They've dropped 25 to 50%. You know, it was said that farmers are doing great, but we can't base this on emotion.
Counselor Jumbo, I don't want to get into, that'll be our debate, and if this passes, we can
Yep.
debate
Well,
that.
I'm gonna say why I'm not gonna
Okay.
support it. So that's what I'm speaking about. We can't base it on material objects like their houses and their vehicles and whatnot. And I thought originally we weren't going to revisit this until the MPAC assessments, which obviously haven't happened yet, so I'm not sure why we're revisiting this again. So, if farmers aren't pulling their weight, I think they need to be shown or told why they're not. But I don't know that that's been provided to them. So I won't be supporting it for the reasons that I just said.
Okay, Counselor McGrail, followed by Counselor Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. So I just have a couple questions. The first one here is that in this motion, it says invested in the asset management plan for rural infrastructure in 2025 and 2026. I assume, but I don't want to assume, that we've only went to 2026 because we cannot forecast for a future council how that. So believe me, I was intrigued very much on the infrastructure part and the rural, but that only guarantees 2 years. And obviously we all know that if we make this move with 25% in 2 years, and the next council says, no, it's gonna go back into the general coffers, it's hard to go back to that 22% or say, hey, we need to keep putting this towards rural infrastructure. So that's my one problem, because we cannot, going forward, new councils dictate, I'm gonna say, where that money goes. So that's one of my things. And I agree with Councilor Juvenville that, I need some facts. I need some real true facts and that's the impact. And I need to really understand where things are gonna all lay and where everything falls. And that piece will really help me understand the gravity of this change to agriculture, but to all sectors. I need that full picture, and that's why tonight, you had my interest for sure, that I cannot support at this time. Thank you.
Counselor Doyle, followed by Counselor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'm fairly similar to Councilor McGrail on this one. I had a question about 25-26, so that is just because we can't go farther than that. Is that correct, I presume? She said it, but nobody answered.
I think that we have, at this point, I'm looking at the direction of what this council can do and not locking a future council into that direction. That could always be extended and that could always be changed, based on a new council if they want to continue that and continue that movement back. But that's really not a decision for us to make at this time. It needs to then come to the next council for them to look at that and redirect that.
Okay, thank you. And then because we don't have the report back yet and we're jumping right from 22 to 25, would you consider a friendly amendment to word it so we would go back up to the possible maximum of 25 without actually saying that? So we could actually, it depends on how the report is, we could either stay at 0.23 or 0.24?
And I think that's also an option if we get the report back. At this point, I've heard that, people aren't going to support it because the information's not there. Well, this is what I'm asking for, is this information. At that point of time, it might not be right for this council to make those changes. But without the information and without the consultation and without, engaging, then how do we truly make this decision? And the only way we're going to get this understanding is to ask for this report to come back with ample amount of time so that we can have those questions answered and be able to communicate and have consultation with our communities and our rural communities.
Michael, you had a
So
comment?
if I can, yeah, despite the wording of the motion, the report is still going to tell you what the consequences are if it's going to be 23% or 24%. And if you have any questions about in between, we'll do our best to answer that too. But we're not going to just give the information on 25%. We'll give you the incremental impact on residents, farmers, that sort of thing. I believe we've done that in the past. So as someone already said, most of this work's already been done. So it'll just be our staff updating things and dusting some stuff off.
Okay. Yeah, I do like the, like Councilman Grail said, the interest to put the money back into rural for 25 and 26. The fact that it does stop there and it's up to the next council, that does make it tough. So we'll see how it goes.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Certainly appreciate the motion coming forward in the manner it has. I think that as Councillor C. McGregor said, it's important to do this transparently and have as much information as we can to make these types of decisions. And historically, we've revisited this every year. So, budget happens when it happens, we pass a budget, and then tax ratio discussions are separate from that budget discussion. And we've modified those ratios a number of times, not the agricultural ratio. We've all sat around this table and modified multi-use residential, industrial, commercial. And they can be changed and changed back annually based on how things change in the community. And I think, I've said in the past that, yeah, it'd be nice to see the impact numbers and then make a decision. But we have been waiting for the impact numbers for a very long time. And I don't share any optimism that wait is going to be short. We're not going to see them for quite a while. So I think going forward with getting more information so we can make some adjustments if we see fit is a reasonable next step. So just for clarification, by passing this motion tonight, we're not changing a tax ratio starting this year. We're not doing anything till this report comes back. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's the way we interpret the motion. So if the motion passes, we would come back with a report and await direction from council. And so until that happens, we don't know if it'll be council's direction to A, do it, B, at what percentage, and C, when it would take effect. That's all up to council when the report comes back.
Great. And then we could still modify this ratio or any other ratio a year from then, 2 years from then. The next council can revisit this every year, as has been done since amalgamation. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. So I really just view this as an opportunity to gain some more information to inform a debate that we have every year anyway. So I'm more than happy to see that information come back. I think it's interesting in this format, a format that I believe the late Councillor Brian Fluker had initially dipped his toe in the water in many years ago. So I look forward to that information and think that this is a great direction to add to transparency to this debate. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson, followed by Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a quick question. Who pays the farm tax? Is it the landowner, or like, let's say there's a farmer that rents and farms land. Do they pay the farm tax, or is it the property owner that pays the farm tax?
It's the property owner.
Thank you.
Councillor Scotchy.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Yeah, if this was simply a motion to increase it, I think it'd be a lot more challenging tonight than it is right now. I think that the one thing I like about this motion is the fact that it also gives the opportunity for the rural communities to engage in the fact if how much money is that going to be and what's that going to look like. We know Edward's team did some different things in the the upcoming budgets when it's coming to like road upgrade policies, improving gravel roads and all that. Dust suppressant is something that I've been hearing about a lot recently, and my one big concern about dust suppressants, if you read, a lot of other municipalities are completely going away from dust suppressant because of the costs associated with it and the fact that some people are saying it doesn't work. And I think it's important to collect the information, to bring that, I think that having a outside that you can enjoy is really important. And I think before we start cutting costs, I think it's important to engage in the community to see exactly what that would look like. And knowing that if it comes back at 0.23 and everybody's happy, or if that money is going to be sent in, do I support just increasing the farm tax at 0.25? Not with this initial motion, but I definitely support looking at it, engaging the public and engaging the rural farmers. I've had about 4 people in the last 2 months that said, get my road upgraded, it's very busy, or, increase the ducts application, I don't care, I'll pay for it, but there's no mechanism, there's no funds there. This is a perfect opportunity for them to get engaged and for us to make a data-driven decision back when this comes back, and hopefully it's a few months, and hopefully we do a good job at, circulating the information and touching base with the community, the agriculture community, and the rural community to see what exactly it looks like. So I think that we can always say no, and I think it's beneficial to have all that information at our hands. So just wanted to leave my comments at that. Thank you.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Really appreciate this conversation. Certainly helping me, figure out the best perspective. I think what I do have a few questions just to clarify. The reference to rural infrastructure certainly can completely relate to why we need more investment in rural infrastructure. I drive on a lot of those roads most of the year myself, and maybe I am not understanding our tax classes or the pie correctly, but this isn't necessarily additional tax revenue, but a shifting of the tax revenue, correct? So we're not necessarily getting more money in, we're just shifting who it comes from. Is that a correct assessment?
Correct.
So, I'm not sure who to ask this to. So we're not getting more money into rural infrastructure. Like, more money isn't coming into this tax pie, it's just shifting around who pays for it. I just want to be clear, because maybe I misunderstood some of the previous discussion, but I got the impression that there was more revenue now coming in from this, but there's not more revenue coming in, we're just shifting it around. Is that a reasonable way to describe it?
Yeah, certainly on the first point, all you're doing is shifting it from one class to the other. So our budget is our budget. So just because one class suddenly gets more doesn't mean that our budget suddenly, well, in this case, going to go up 3%, right? It doesn't work that way. We don't get more money. It just means that in this case, the agricultural farm tax class will pay 25% if this, and this is all if, right? The second, so that is absolutely a shifting. I want to make that clear. It doesn't mean we get any more money. Same thing with MPAC. If ultimately MPAC says that certain homes now went up in value and others went down in value, it doesn't mean we get more money as a municipality. Our budget is our budget. Whatever costs to provide the services and whatever tax increase you impose, that doesn't change with a shift in the ratios. The second part is something that's a little bit new for us, which is what's in the motion, and I think the report will address that. So we would have to talk about what exactly is rural infrastructure, and it was mentioned today. I don't disagree with the way it was generally referred to. Gravel roads, we do have some gravel roads not in rural areas, so there's a few areas where we'll have some issues, but it's not going to create any more money. It just means that I think where the councillor's going is that if in fact the tax ratio is going to shift so that farmers are paying more of our total budget as a result, then perhaps some of those capital projects that normally wouldn't be accelerated or prioritized would now be looked at slightly differently because there's some additional funds coming from the agricultural tax class. I don't want to put words in the councillor's mouth, but I think that's exactly what the intention is. So the report will probably give some examples of that so that it's better understood by everybody. But I do want to say at the end of the day, it is important that you consider advice from staff. So I'll give you an example. Just because if in fact this gets passed, a project that perhaps we wouldn't do for 10 years because a particular drain doesn't need to be replaced yet, based on what the engineers are saying, that's not suddenly going to be replaced 10 years earlier, right? There's still going to have to be some analysis and dialogue about what needs to be done. I think the intent here is that there are times when we put off rural needs because there are more people in the urban area. But if the tax class is going to shift so that there's more money coming in from the farmers, then that is something that councillors will be able to look at as they start planning capital projects. So I think, again, I'm just interpreting the motion. I haven't had any, extended discussion with the councillor on it. But I think that's the way Gord understands it as well. He's nodding his head, so I'll take that as a yes. So.
Thank you. That's helpful, because I might have misunderstood a bit of the earlier conversation. Now, sort of to build on those comments, Michael, does that mean, as a Ward 6 councillor, that money is now shifting from, let's say, a project in an urban area? If we're now, does that sort of set a precedent that we're now getting a little more specific as to how we designate where these tax ratio funds are going? Does that mean if we're now specifically going to address a rural infrastructure project more robustly, does that, since there's no more money coming in, does that mean an urban area project now may get bumped?
I mean, that's possible, and I'm not a member of the KFA, but I think they would probably say to you that on occasions there's been agricultural projects that have been bumped. And so I will say this, that even with a 3% shift, it's not going to drastically change our capital plan. There's still lots of things that have to be done that everybody uses, whether you're in an urban area or rural area. So that I think we all know that. What is going to do is allow council to consider that. So we know that when we have gravel road issues, I think it was Councillor Thompson that talked about how expensive it is. And so it feels like it's a target we'll never be able to reach. And so sometimes when that happens, you choose just not to do it at all. This shift may put us in a position where, well, maybe a target that's hard to reach, but maybe we come up with a 30-year plan for it or something like that, given the shift in the tax rate. So these are decisions for council to make, not us. All we will do is write a report, give you the best examples we can, and then when the time comes in the fall, you can debate that and make those decisions. So.
Okay, just one last question and a comment. In terms of process, maybe it's a Judy question, actually. Councillor B. McGregor mentioned that we can continue to review this every year, for example, which I do think, I totally agree with both Councillor McGregors, that this should be reviewed regularly. I think that's a very reasonable approach to a lot of work that we do, especially when it comes to budget, because things do change, so I completely agree with that. But from a process piece, is that a change of direction and emotion, or can we, every year say it in a certain month or a certain budget session, say we're going to review this and perhaps change it again? Is that?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was talking with the Chief Financial Officer today about this, and every year the tax policy is brought forward to council, and one of those is the farm tax ratio as part of that, and so that's where it would come back every year, unless Gord has any other comments. That's it. Yep.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. So I don't have any issue with reviewing it. I think we should be doing that, and I do believe there are reasonable arguments to be made that we should start discussing a phase-in. I do, and I shared this with Councillor McGregor. This wording of this motion, though, does say, it does direct staff to implement this. It doesn't say whether or not we will review it and then decide. How I am reading it, and if that's not the intent of the mover, I'd be happy to be corrected. But how I read this, it says administration is bringing a report with a recommendation to phase this in. So that to me reads that we will be doing this regardless of the discussion, and then we can vote on it then. But I mean, the motion does say we will be doing it. So from a perspective of then Councillor Harrigan's discussion about stakeholder consultation, again, I fully support that. I think that's critical for any issue. But we're already telling them we're doing it. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct. That's not the way we interpret it. The fact that it says administration bring back a report, that's very clear to administration that we bring back a report and ultimately council gives us direction. I realize that because it says that it has a recommendation to phase in over the remainder of the term, the 25%. I've already indicated that the report will give council the options to look at 23, 24%. Again, I don't want to speak for Councillor McGregor, but I think because staff on a number of occasions have brought forward the suggestion that it be 25%, I'm going to assume that you assume that that would be our recommendation. But having said that, the report will give you all the information you need, and we're not taking this motion as direction. So just for the public very clearly, if this motion gets passed tonight, that does not mean anything is changing with the tax ratio. There will be another meeting sometime in the fall. Everybody will be aware of it. There'll be a public meeting about it. There'll also be an engagement based on this motion. There'll also be an engagement opportunity for people to give their feedback. And then the councillors around the table will make the decision. So it's not implemented until such time as councillors make the decision. And I'm going to ask the treasurer, do you understand the motion the same way? Because ultimately you'll be doing the work.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Okay, so even though it says that we are asking administration to bring a report this fall with a recommendation to phase this in, we still have that opportunity when that comes back to say no, basically.
That's
and I'm not
correct.
saying, because I have not made this final decision on what might be the best option, so I would like to see that information, but I did have a concern that it did imply that this decision, we were telling staff what we wanted that recommendation to be. So if there is still opportunity for the community to have reasonable opportunities for feedback, and that recommendation may change, that I would be comfortable with that. So I do appreciate that clarification.
Yeah, your concern is noted. It's worded a little bit differently, but at the end of the day, it comes down to intent. And I think we're all very clear. It's on the public record what the intent was. I've made it very clear to the public and anyone watching. I'm sure any of you that are giving interviews will make it very clear that this isn't taking place. Council is taking this, if this passes, as direction to come back with a report. And then at that time, council will make their decision about what they want to do.
Thank you.
All right, Councillor C. McGregor, final thoughts.
I think pretty much everything has been said. Just that I want to reiterate again, the intent is to bring back a report for this council to be able to look at, to be able to understand, with my thought of a way to actually shift some additional funds into rural infrastructure. It's a problem that we've dealt with all the way along, and you know, at this point, and I'm sorry if there was confusion with the intent of this, because you know the report will bring back the different rate percentages and what that would mean all the way along for us to look at, and like I said, it was only up to the 2026 because I didn't want, or I wasn't going to impose what I was asking for them to bring back onto the next council. So, and if it's something that's looked at, you know, maybe it's 1% that we shift, and the next council looks at it again. And if it's looked at annually, then it can be reviewed and to see if this actually works and it works within the municipality. Thanks. I hope that everyone supports the fact that I'm just really asking for a report to come back to better educate us on this in a timely manner before budget deliberations begin in the spring.
With that, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 12-5.
Item 19, infrastructure and engineering services.
19B, motion by Councillor Hall regarding additional lighting over downtown Wallaceburg sidewalks.
Councillor Hall and Councillor C. McGregor, can I just put this on the floor, please?
So moved, Mayor Kenneth.
Happy to second.
Councillor Hall, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll say the motion. I move that council direct staff to explore including additional lighting over the downtown Wallaceburg sidewalks as part of the streetlight replacement project, and 2, all details, including estimated costs and timing, be brought back to council as soon as possible for discussion and voting.
Councillor C. McGregor, anything to add?
No.
Okay.
Thanks.
Councillor Doyle, followed by Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the motion, Aaron. Although I do think it's a great idea. Just in the time that we are in with an over 9% tax increase coming down the chain, and we've already got a high level implication that this is going to cost $170,000, and it's an upgrade from kind of any other service level in any other community. I would say now is kind of more of a time for needs as opposed to wants, and to me this is a want. So I can't support it for that reason, but I think the idea is great, just not the right timing in my opinion. Thank you.
Councillor Sakachi?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Caniff. I definitely understand where Councillor Hall is coming from this, just because I also get some concerns about the new LED lighting. I guess my question would be to maybe Edward or Gord. When on my first term of council, I learned a lesson from actually Councillor Brock McGregor when there was a conversation similar to this about a crosswalk. The crosswalk was supported, and within, I would say, 2 or 3 meetings, we had 2 additional crosswalks come up, and those end up both being funded because we supported one in the other area. I guess the question I had to either Edward or to Gord is the fact that will this be an area rated service because it is up above and beyond? And then if we're doing this downtown, will we not be doing downtown Dresden, downtown Thamesville, downtown Chatham, downtown Blenheim, and how that would look to see if that's the case?
Thank you. Through the mayor to the councillor. In terms of setting the level of service, I would say that if we go down this path in Wallsburg, this is most likely be a request in the future from all those other communities. So, because it is an increase in the level of service, I would anticipate all those BIAs would come back the same way. And in terms of the area rating, I'm going to ask Gord to answer that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We currently have 3,000 tax rates in Chatham-Kent because we area rate this and that all over the place. We could look at the cost and see if it's worth adding a few more pennies onto the Wallsburg downtown to have it. We really, at this point, we don't know what the costs are and what the implications would be. But, another alternative, if this request was coming from BIAs could also increase their own levies on the stores in the downtown and ask for this level of service to be provided, and that the BIA could come with this ask as well and charge their own members for something like this as well. But, so either way, it could be charged to where the service is provided.
Yeah, and I hate to speak against something that means a lot to a community because I'm certain this does. That's just my only challenge is that I know for a fact that we've had similar conversations in my area. I just don't understand like how, if they're brought up and we support this, how I say, well, this isn't a service level that we do when now it is, right? So I just don't know what that cost would look like if we started doing community by community. I didn't know if it was going to be, I would be more supportive if it said, look at the downtown, all the downtown BIAs or the lighting, because to be honest with you, the new LED lights are horrible. So I completely understand Councillor Hall's perspective. It's just that I don't know how far this will go, and I do know that there'll be potential extra costs associated with it, because I would likely move a similar motion myself, I think. So thank you.
I'll go to you for final comments. Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'm just looking back and forth to Councillor B. McGregor because I think it was last term we made a motion that was passed. But because of all the changes and things that were happening in the downtown area, they asked if we could just hold off on it because it was our motion and it didn't make sense to keep moving with it at that point. And I'm just feeling like it was just put on the back burner until, the things, the information with the mall and everything. But there was the concern about the LED directional lighting, only lighting the cars driving down the street. not the people walking on the sidewalk. But we never received anything back, and not, this is not a staff problem. They, you know, we just mutually all agreed, like, it just made sense to just wait until things were done. But I'm going to support it because, you know, you're only asking for a report. We did the SEPTED audit. It was recommended in the SEPTED audit, so why bother if we're not going to even consider these things that are crime prevention through environmental design, like, you know, anyway, I'm going to support it, and that's why, and it's not the first time this has been brought up. It's just the first time for Wallaceburg.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Story.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate the motion and appreciate Councillor Sakatchi's concerns as well. And I think that it makes me feel a little bit better that we're asking for a report back. And I think that that does maybe set some precedent for how much this might cost in other communities as well. And I think if in the report it mentions how it would be funded. So, you know, if this was a motion off the floor to say, we're going to do it tomorrow no matter what, no matter how much it costs, and it's going in the front of the line on capital projects, I think it's a different debate. I think if we have a report that comes back that says this is how much it will likely cost, here's some options for funding, or it's going to go into a list of capital projects and get prioritized with other projects, I think that's a pretty reasonable thing to at least evaluate. So I'm supportive of it going forward in the current state that this motion's in, and fine to receive a report and then look at the implications throughout the community at that time as well.
Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't want to repeat what everyone has said, but I actually have changed my mind during this conversation. And to Councillor Crew's point, I didn't know that, and that's why I have to share my concerns with the way this new motion format, because it doesn't give the opportunity to know that context. Because I will admit I share Councillor Doyle and Councillor Sakatchi's concerns about we are in a must-do versus a nice-to-do versus a maybe-do council term. And I don't disagree with the need for it, but we're just in such a we've heard so many financial discussions tonight about what we're facing that we really do need to examine every single dollar. But, so I was leaning towards not supporting it because I do feel that right now we're in a critical must-do term. But if we've already discussed this and that was promised as part of a previous plan, then I think we need to follow through on that commitment to review it. It wasn't part of a plan?
So, Councillor Crew, can you clarify just your comment from earlier,
I
please?
apologize.
Basically, it was the same thing for Chatham. It was get a report back.
Oh, I apologize. So, sir, I apologize.
That's
You're
it.
referring to what?
That's it, yeah. No,
referring to Chatham,
there was
not
no
Wallaceburg?
approval of costs or anything. No, it was just, no, it hasn't come back because because of all the changes downtown with the mall and everything, and there was changes happening, and we don't know where the lighting would be needed and what parks. It didn't make sense to keep moving with a plan when you don't even know the whole plan yet.
Okay, so you were not referring to Wallaceburg?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, that's, nope, I'm in Ward 6.
Okay. Well, that's why it's good to have this discussion to clarify. Thank you very much. I appreciate that clarification.
Councillor Hall, final words.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mayor Kenneth. Thank you, everyone, for the comments as well, and the commentary tonight. You know, Councillor Crew hit it on the head. You know, this motion really stemmed from, we did a SEPTED audit in downtown Wallaceburg, and this was one of the recommendations that was in it. And, you know, when I looked at that and looked at some of our other strategic directions that we're trying to do as council, I felt it you know, it really checks off a couple of those boxes. So, and like I said, and this is just asking for a report back. I know Mr. Brown already has some comments and details, I guess, with the motion. So, you know, if we can get this back in a report, and I totally hear Councillor Doyle and Councillor Sakatchi, you know, if it takes it's only been a couple of weeks, and information in this motion with some estimated costs and some ideas, if we can get some information about, well, what would this look like for Blenheim, what would this look like for Dresden, if that could be included in the report too. I know it's not it says that in there, but if that's something that staff can include in that with this report, that would be, as long as that's not burdensome or anything like that, but I'd be all for that. I wasn't trying to make this just a Wallaceburg thing, but you know, if we can get information for everyone, then we'll at least we'll have that information and we can make that decision at that time. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll put it to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 15-2.
Item 21, Chief Administrative Office.
21B, Building and Land Acquisition, Affordable Housing, Chatham, at 55 Croydon Street, Chatham.
Councillor Bondi and Councillor Doyle, can I get puts on the floor for discussion, please?
Sure, so moved.
Putting a lot of pressure on you there. Councillor Bondi, the floor is yours, followed by Councillor Doyle. Then I got Councillor Story and Councillor Jubenville.
Well, to start with, I read the report, and I guess we could likely conclude that if we pass this acquisition, this purchase tonight, sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, we're going to build this development. Now, I know we're not approving that tonight. We're only approving the purchase of the land, but I've been through this once or twice, and, you know, if we're $1.5 million in or whatever, when it comes back to the actual build, it'll happen. So I think we can assume as much. And again, that's not what we're voting on. I get that. But in my interpretation, I think we really are voting on a determination to do this. So I have one question that's more of like an engineering question, which I asked last time this came around, and I didn't get much of an answer. But my question is, the current facility, building school, which I'm pretty familiar with, one of my daughters went there, I think it has 3 washrooms, like a boys, a girls, and a staff. So how can we possibly put 95 apartments on top of this thing and not replace the sewers, the infrastructure? That's 95 kitchens, 95 showers, 95 bathrooms. If you put 95 apartments on top of my house, I'm sure that sewer is not going to handle it. So it's an engineering thing. So are we going to have a massive infrastructure ask?
Thank you for your question. Ray Harper, Director of Municipal Housing Development. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to you, Councillor. So this report is just for the acquisition of this land for future opportunities. Administration is not suggesting or planning or has communicated in any shape or form that we're building 95 units.
Well, it's in the report.
No, in the report, it was referencing what a previous proposal was.
So why is it in the report if it's not?
It's the background information on what the previous plan was from.
So we don't plan on building an affordable transitional housing. Like, I know that's not what we're voting on tonight, but, you know, I think we can assume, we all have brains, that this is why we're buying this piece of land. We're not buying it to make it into a park. Are we?
We're buying the asset to provide options to address our housing needs.
Okay.
And so for one example, there is an option of keeping the gymnasium as a future rec center. So for example, if that was to take place as a future report or recommendation, it would be impossible to build 95 units. There wouldn't be the physical space to do something like that, as an example.
So why did we vote to give Indwell $10 million a year ago to build this if it's impossible to do?
I believe that proposal included demolishing or renovating the school and adding on to the school and not keeping the gymnasium. And that proposal was inclusive of a rapid housing federal grant approval.
Right, which they didn't get the money, so the project died. So here we are. Like typically, not typically, we don't buy property as investments as a municipality. Not in 14 years I've been sitting here. So you're telling me that we're not going to build an affordable housing complex on that land? If we buy it tonight, we're buying it tonight for the gym. Is that what I'm getting? Because that's, come on.
Yeah, maybe I can help with that. So council gets to decide what you're gonna be doing with the property. So if you buy the property tonight, then ultimately council gets to decide what you wanna do with it. So council has expressed that affordable housing, and the whole spectrum of housing is important to this council. We've been talking about it all night. We talked about it during the budget discussion as well. So what staff is suggesting is that you've got this piece of property that's available for us. It can be used for housing, and it can be used for affordable housing. It could be used for supportive housing. It can be used for whatever else you want. Obviously, there's certain things you wouldn't use it for, like a parking lot or anything like that. But the decision down the road will be up to council to decide whether you want to use it for affordable housing or supportive housing. As I've said a couple of times, it's very difficult for us to engage in the market of buying property. I think somebody earlier today questioned our competence or something like that. The challenge is that when we try to get in the market of buying property off the MLS, we've seen that before. We can't compete. And so what happens is the private sector buys the property and they go ahead and do whatever they can, and they're in the business of making money. So there's less and less properties available to us to support your objective, which is affordable housing. And I'm sure Jody will get into it later, but also talk about the distinction between supportive housing and supportive housing. So all this recommendation is to acquire the property and give us direction to see if we can come up with either or. Ultimately, you guys around the table decide. It's not administration. I've been reading emails where people are saying they have it on good authority that we're doing X. Well, you're the authority, and I know you haven't voted on it yet, so there's absolutely no decision that's been made by council about what's happening on this property. And so forgive my frustration.
Fair enough, but I think we can assume it's for affordable housing. As we approved a $10 million present gift a year ago to contribute to an affordable housing build on this site. So couldn't one assume, I know we can't assume anything in this world, but we can. Couldn't we assume that that's why we're buying this? We're not buying it for, a future project that we have no idea what it's going to be. I think we can pretty well make an educated guess on what the purpose of buying this is.
I would think if council supports this, the intent is to support your objective to make sure we have some properties available for the housing spectrum. Whether it's going to be supportive housing or affordable housing or attainable housing, that will depend on you. And I imagine you won't make that decision until you understand A, what can be built on the site, and B, what kind of other sources of funding there is. So you're right, when the decision was made in the past to look at this particular property, that was based on an application that was made to the higher levels of government, and we didn't get the money. And so ultimately it failed. But if the province were to announce tomorrow that they're willing to give municipalities X amount of dollars for affordable housing projects, then council may very well say, hey, we have a piece of property that we own, it's ready, and we want to leverage the provincial dollars to do it. If you don't have any property, you're not going to get any of those dollars from upper levels of government. So it's a decision you have to make. I just want to be clear. Administration isn't pushing this particular site. It is one of the sites. It's a former school site. It is appropriate use for some sort of housing, and so we're presenting it to you as an option.
But you are sort of pushing it. The recommendation is to buy it, the recommendation from administration. So you're in favor of it, obviously.
We're in favor of purchasing the property because of how difficult it has been for us to purchase property. And this is a piece of property that is already properly zoned for this particular use.
Well, we can do that in a heartbeat, though. We can change. We actually did change the zoning on this one, didn't we? Last time this came around?
This one went to the Ontario Land Tribunal for a decision.
But we voted in favor of changing the zone, or adding an additional use, which was residential, which was the craziest thing.
We don't have to.
No, I know, I get it. Okay, I feel like I'm getting sort of railroaded on this one because clearly we're buying this for affordable housing. So that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me. It's fine. I get it.
No, but maybe Councillor, if it's okay, perhaps now is a good time for Jody to talk about the difference between affordable housing and supportive housing. I think there's a distinct difference. Someone earlier today said they were different and we didn't understand the difference.
Okay.
So you've asked me to confirm that if we bought this, it would be for affordable housing? No, not necessarily.
Or affordable or supportive or any of the above. So I'll get back to, and I'll be finished in a second. I won't take up too much time because I'm sure you're going to turn my mic off anyway. Yeah, you're the guy with the magic button up there, right? Okay, sorry. Okay, now, assuming that we go down this road, I don't think we should buy the property because of what I think we might do, in my opinion. Now, if we were to do that, I disagree with purchasing the property because in this neighborhood, these people bought their homes beside a sleepy little school and a quiet little church. So if we put in some sort of development that may be affordable or transitional housing, and it may be kind of busy, I don't think it's fair to the neighborhood. The neighborhood's going to fail. It's not going to fail, but the property values are clearly going to go down. And I don't think that's arguable. Any real estate agent would clearly, I'm sure, agree with that. So I disagree with purchasing the property for the potential use, which I think I'm probably having a pretty good guess at what that's going to be. So I'm against it. I don't think we should vote, I don't think we should be buying property. We sell property all the time because we have lots of property. We divest property. We don't typically buy property for investments. That's just not something that the municipality does. So this, I think there's a motivation. I may be wrong, and it will be council's decision eventually, but that's just my opinion. So that's why I don't think this is a fair thing to do to the neighborhood that has lived there for years and has worked hard to be there and to build up their neighborhood and have their neighbor is a small little school and a sleepy church. That's going to go away if we do this. So there goes the magic button. Okay, thank you. All right.
We have 7 more speakers, so so I'll go Councillor Doyle, then Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I have a question for Gord. What would this purchase do to our current tax rate for 2025? If it's already over 9%, do you know where that would put us?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the question. It will have zero impact, and I'm going to explain why. This is very specific that this is currently being treated as an investment in that we're not recommending that you fund this tonight. We didn't say to bring $1 million into the 2025 budget to fund this. This is just what's been asked tonight is in number 6 there is to investigate and report back with recommendations of what to do with this property potentially for future support of an affordable housing.
Sorry, I was just with regard to the just over 1 million.
Right, so if council decides in 6 months or a year not to proceed with supportive or affordable housing, we then can take whatever action council then wants to do. Maybe it's to build a park, maybe it's to sell to a private developer for regular single dwellings, maybe it's just, council at least will have control of this property going forward. And with prices of real estate, interior to the city of Chatham, we believe that this is an investment that we would get a return on that investment if council decides to do nothing with it for our own purposes whatsoever and decides to put it on the open market. We believe we will get the investment back of both the $1,050,000 plus the $200,000 of demolition and site prep that we'll do on this. So there will be zero impact on the 2025 budget. Your future budget impacts is if council decides to build more affordable housing or supportive housing.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much. So I guess in my opinion, could be wrong, but if they bought it in 2021 when market prices were peak kind of 2021, 2022, and now we're going to spend $400,000 more when market prices have came down, that's a tough sell for me. And then to spend that much money in in the economy we're in right now with our tax increases, that's a hard sell for me as well, when we don't have a report that says, hey, here's what we're gonna buy it for, and here's exactly what we're doing with it, and here's how much it's gonna cost. To me, that's a tough one as well. And then I think if we were to manage supportive housing, affordable housing, maybe not so much, but supportive housing ourselves at a municipality, I would think that that's gonna cost us more than if Indwell was gonna do that before. So now we potentially are gonna be into increased costs going down the road farther. So that's, unless that's way off the line. But those, just for some of those reasons, I don't know if I can support this. I'll see how the conversation goes, but that's kind of where I'm at now.
Councillor Story, followed by Councillor Jubenville.
Could I make a request first that we have Jody explain that difference before I get to my comments? Because that was one of my questions, but I actually want to keep my 5 minutes, so I'd rather.
Jody, go ahead.
Would you
And,
mind? Thank you.
Please, so we all are on the same page. Thanks.
Happy to provide that information through you, Mr. Mayor. There is a bit of a distinction between affordable housing and supportive housing. So I think everybody is aware of the fact that CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, solicits information across the country around the average market rents. And so what they do is they identify what the average market rents are for each community. And what we do when we talk about affordable housing is we look to see what rents are about 80% of the average market rent. And so as a result of that decreased rent, that's what we consider to be affordable rents, okay? The difference between affordable rents and supportive housing may be provided in affordable housing units, and there could be some supplements that are provided as well, but it's supports that are provided to individuals so that they can live independently. And the supports can vary depending on the housing needs of the individuals, and it can vary from some supports, it can vary to, and it can include up to 24/7 supports. So it depends on what that project looks like, what the needs of that community are. And so that's really what the difference is between the affordable and the supportive housing. And when we talk about the continuum of housing supports that are really needed by individuals and residents here, when we talk about encampments and how do we help move people from encampments, this is not transitional housing. Supportive housing is more permanent housing. We want to move individuals out of encampments. We want to move them into affordable housing. If supportive housing is needed, we want to make sure that those individuals have those housing supports available to them. So I hope that provides some clarity for you.
It does, thank you, although I would probably add, I think you've mentioned this before, but 80% of market rent right now is still really expensive for most people. I think affordable housing in this context is a real misnomer because that is still a huge barrier for folks. In supportive housing, are there models where people do pay expenses in rent or an equivalent type of financial transaction?
Do you mean, do they pay rent?
Sure, yeah.
Absolutely. They will be required to pay some degree of rent, and in some cases, I'm guessing, I don't know, Ray, if you can speak to this, I would assume that there would probably be some utilities that would be covered as well, so, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To you, Councillor, to add on to Jody's comment, I make it clear that the municipality is not looking to get into the business to operate and own supportive housing. That's best left to agencies such as Inwell or other agencies that are experienced in delivering supportive housing and operating supportive housing. We're not looking to staff up and try to get into a new business model where we don't have the staff, the expertise, or the experience to deliver that type of housing service.
Okay, thank you. I have a couple more questions and then a comment or two. I want to thank everyone for coming tonight and sharing your feedback. I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts and those who submitted electronically as well. It's a topic that we talk about regularly at this council, and as a Ward 6 councillor, and I assume probably my fellow Ward 6 councillors as well, I mean, we get calls and have been in discussions about the encampments and the life and death crisis that we are facing in Chatham primarily, but I know it's happening in other communities. And we need to find a way to move individuals out of these encampments. Like, it's just inhumane that in 2024, we have people living in tents in a park that continues to grow every week. I just can't wrap my head around that. In a country as wealthy as Canada, in a province as successful as Ontario, that we have people, our friends and neighbors, our family members living in tents, that number growing every day in a place like Chatham-Kent. Like, it's stunning to me that we have to face this, and I'm really unhappy, as Mayor Kenneth has mentioned more than enough times, that the province and the feds are not pulling their weight, because that's when it comes to this council and we are forced to make decisions that are not really our responsibility, but we're forced to take it. So I hope you appreciate, folks, that we are listening to you and we understand your frustrations, because we share them. And it's a deeply disturbing topic, and it's one that I never imagined. I was very naive coming to this term. I knew this was a problem, but I still can't believe how much worse it's gotten since we've begun this term. So, all of that said, I do generally have a concern with number one in this recommendation, because I do question why we are paying substantially more than what Indwell paid for. Did they invest into that property that in amounts that we're now reimbursing them for? I do have some concerns why in this case we are almost doubling the purchase price.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. There's a few variables that could affect why that is. For one, what an individual, organization, or agency paid for an asset a few years ago doesn't necessarily that's what you pay for the asset now. So what the valuation is, the fair market value of that asset, that was two appraised value processes that were done on the asset, as well as the most recent comparator is a school that sold, not just a random school in a different city or a different community or even on a different side of town, a similar school in a couple neighborhoods over sold for over $1.6 million, and then resold again for even a greater amount. So that being said, I'm sure that Indwell definitely has investments into the property since acquiring it, maintaining it, and this was agreed upon fair market value for that asset for them to sell to the municipality.
So there would be no opportunity for a recommendation from council or direction saying, would you be willing to go back to Indwell and renegotiate that number?
Well, one thing that would caution to Indwell, and I'm not going to pretend that I'm their accountant or know their finances inside and out, but certainly if this asset's on the fair market book value and they sold it for a loss, then they would incur a loss.
Okay.
So maybe I can just answer the question more directly. Yeah, that's an option. You know, council can give us the direction to go back to Indwell. We anticipate they'll say no, but you can certainly give us that direction to go back and ask to purchase the property at a lower price. And my only caution is that they may then put the property up for sale. And if they do, it may be more than this, and ultimately we may not own it. But those are consequences that if council's okay with, then that's an option. So, yeah, we could entertain a motion. I was not involved in the face-to-face discussions. Ray was, and I believe somebody else from administration was. So it's unlikely that they would accept a lower number, but you're certainly free to give us that direction.
Thank you for that. Is there a reason why Indwell simply just doesn't continue to own the building until we do have that direction, or we do have a grant that we are applying for? Is there a reason why we sort of couldn't just leave things as a status quo for now and then address them when there are more specific details or information available to us?
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. The Indwell doesn't have a limitless source of funds, so owning the asset, maintaining the asset, and operating the asset certainly comes at a cost to them. What I can say is in our discussions of trying to develop a supportive housing model for the community of Chatham-Kent is in those conversations, if Indwell had decided to sell the asset, that they would at least explore those conversations with the municipality first before putting it on the open market.
Okay. Because I do wonder sometimes if we're, I understand Councillor Bondi's concerns, but if this proposal wasn't going ahead without substantial government funding regardless, would the ownership of that site need to change? But I appreciate that they might say, well, we're going to liquidate this asset because we don't know what's happening and we don't want it on our balance sheet anymore, so now it's
1 minute warning.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, and maybe, Councillor, I can help with that. I mean, they're not like Skyline or anybody. They're not in the business of owning buildings. That's not their business. So for them, it's just sitting there. They would rather put it out on the market and get as much as they can so that they can take the money and support other projects that are involved in. But I think in the interest of trying to work with us, they agreed to try to sell it to us at what they thought was a reasonable price. We've checked it against assessed value, appraised values, and we feel that it's not far off the price given our experiences in other properties here. So we don't have the control over what they do, right? They have the right to make whatever decision they want. If they choose to sell it, we can't stop them from selling it. They've also sunk money into it because they were involved in an appeal. They obviously were involved in making applications, that sort of thing. And I think at this point they just are quite happy to just sell it and to move on to other properties if there's nothing coming out of this for them.
Thank you. Just two, I think, really quick questions. I appreciate your leeway, Mr. Chair. With the Ontario Land Tribunal decision on the number of units, does that apply to the property, no matter what is put there, or to that specific project? Because it went down from 90 to a lower number, correct? Would that type of occupants or unit number remain attached to that property no matter who owned it?
I would not be an expert in the Ontario Land Tribunal, but my understanding is that would apply to the owners of that property and their development.
Okay.
I can't say if that would apply to
Well,
other developments.
the exception to that is a couple of other potential owners like a municipality, but maybe Mr. Jocks can answer that question.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. May of 2023, Municipal Council approved a zoning bylaw amendment application from Indwell, which added supportive housing with a specific definition as an additional permitted use at this property. That application or that approval was for over 90 units. It was subsequently appealed to the Ontario Land Tribunal. The municipality settled with Indwell on that appeal, and the Ontario Land Tribunal approved 75 units at that site. If this property developed as supportive housing by a private sector entity, they would be bound by that zoning regulation of 75 units unless they submitted and were successful in a new planning application. If the municipality developed a building, it's not, the council's not bound by its own zoning bylaw. However, if the municipality were to pursue development at this site, I think it's been stated several times that there would be consultation, and council would ultimately have the decision of what was built at that site. Thanks.
Okay, I know that's because that was a concern raised by folks in the neighborhood. So if we, for example, said no to this tonight, Endwell said we're going to sell this on the open market, and we bought, and Skyline bought it.
You're way over.
I know, I'm sorry.
7 speakers, so.
Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jubenville, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mayor. So there's a memorandum of understanding, which I haven't seen, but I spoke with Emily, and all of council, we have the ability to see it if we so choose to do so. Like, are we bound to forge into this agreement with Indwell? It's vague. What are we agreeing to with Indwell? Can you elaborate at all and share any information that we are doing with Indwell?
So the memo of understanding is just to continue the collaboration efforts, to work with Indwell, to lobby upper levels of government to try to develop supportive housing for Chatham-Kent. It's not bound by any specific address or any location. But it's the continued efforts from both parties and to act in good faith and try to resolve those funding issues.
But can I add to that?
Okay.
Normally, we wouldn't even have had a memorandum of understanding. The main reason for the memorandum of understanding in this case is because there were certain dollars that were fundraised throughout the process that were gathered from people, from organizations by Indwell to support the project that as we've heard a number of times now, hasn't gone ahead. So part of the reason for the memorandum of understanding is we wanted some sort of commitment from them that those dollars would still be used in this community in the event that we develop some sort of a supportive housing project with Indwell. Normally, when you buy a piece of property, you don't need a memorandum of understanding. It was to deal with that sort of, it's an asset, right? It's money that's been collected, and we wanted to make sure that there was at least some sort of a commitment to that. So that's not something we'd normally get into great detail in public, but obviously there's questions about it, so that's what the purpose of the memorandum of understanding is primarily.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So, in a sense, we're still tied to Indwell to some degree. I mean, we're in some kind of a partnership with them. Like, can we not just purchase this independently of Indwell with no affiliation or any ties to Indwell? Is that not on the table? Or do we have to have this? Is it just conducive of the donations that they've received? Can we not just make some kind of an agreement about that and then separate Indwell from the rest of the project?
Yeah, I'm going to ask our solicitor today to comment on that. So, first of all, maybe if you can comment on whether memorandums of understanding are binding in the first place, and then second of all, perhaps answer the question about are we somehow tied? I know that contractually we're not tied to Indwell. If we were to purchase the property from them, then they're the vendor, we're the purchaser, we go separate ways. So maybe you can just give some details about the contractual liability and also what the memorandum of understanding speaks to.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as Mr. Dubin sort of alluded to there, the memorandum of understanding, which at this point is still in draft, but in general terms, so it's important to note that, but in general terms, a memorandum of understanding is distinct from a contract in the sense that really what it is a written intention by the parties to act sort of in mutual good faith towards a common objective, which in this case is support of affordable housing in Chatham-Kent. The key piece, though, I think from a legal perspective to the great benefit of the municipality, is that the MOU as presently drafted, it contemplates that Indwell will commit those funds that were initially raised to this project towards future supportive housing in Chatham-Kent. So that is a big commitment that would be, provided the MOU is reached, provided that term makes its way in there, that would be a significant asset, as Mr. Dubin said, to Chatham-Kent. Mr. Dubin, did you have a second question?
No, I think you've answered it. I could think the question is whether or not an MOU is actually a contract, and you spoke to that already.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm still confused because it's still making Indwell, they're still entrenched in this, but
We're
to
not.
some extent.
Maybe we haven't been clear. We're not entrenched in it at all. The purpose of the memorandum of understanding is to make sure that if we are engaged in a supportive housing project, that the monies that were raised will support the project. It doesn't mean that Indwell has to be a partner in the same way that was originally contemplated. It was just really a way to make sure that those dollars might stay in the community. Like I said, normally you buy a piece of property, you don't have an MOU. It was only because we wanted to make sure that people in this community who raise funds to help support the very people that Councillor Story was talking about will see that money stay in this community. So there's no contractual commitment to Indwell to do anything with them going forward. They certainly wouldn't commit to it, and we haven't asked them to commit to that.
Okay, thank you. And Ray, you did mention that we weren't intending on proceeding with supportive. It was more of an affordable housing initiative, but the word supportive is in this motion. So are we, is it supportive and/or affordable, or is it just affordable that we could potentially do?
Those are just potential options at this time. So what I was referring to is we weren't proceeding with the original 95 units that was a part of the original plan that Councilor Bondi had suggested.
Okay, thank you. I think from the feelings I've received from the people that live around the area, I think that they would be more apt to be supportive of this if it was 100% just for affordable housing, and because it could be transitional or supportive, I think they might be a little hesitant. So for that reason, I probably won't support this. Thank you.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Worship. A lot of my questions have been answered already. Thank you to everybody who came in for deputations. This has been a hot topic for the last week. Couple of questions. If we purchase this property, what is our timeline on getting something built on this property? Because I know we've got other builds already that we've passed that are in the process of being started, I would presume. What is the timeline for this property?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councilor, for your question. The timeline is to bring some recommendations and options for Council's future considerations on this property in early 2025. So as part of this property, we have our own initiatives. We're trying to build our own affordable housing in the community, but we also have our local private nonprofits, several of them looking for opportunities such as this, as well as private investors and private developers looking for affordable lands for this. So there will be engagement processes with those other parties to be able to provide some options for council to consider.
Do we have no other properties that we have been looking at in relation to these projects that they've wanted?
So we have several properties that we're working to try to get to a shovel-ready process. So for example, our Park Street property that is currently in environmental remediations is one example that takes some time and cost to incur. And we have some other ones that we're working on right now. But this would represent a reasonable shovel-ready project that does not have those constraints.
I just find it hard to swallow the extra $400,000 on top of this that they've not, it sat there. If they could justify that they've put $400,000 into it, I could swallow it a little bit more, but at this point I can't support this. And what happens while it sits as a municipal asset? Do the people from the park then move in there? And it's something I know that neighborhood doesn't want, so that was my questions.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor McGrail.
Thank you. Gosh, I do have a lot of comments. I'll try not to go over 5 minutes. First of all, this is a purchase of a property. I see the timer. This is the purchase of a property, right? So there's no other plan. This isn't a partnership with Indwell. There's no plan. This is the purchase of a property for a price that's on the report. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councilor, yes, that's correct.
Great. Where do we locate affordable housing now? Has the municipality ever purchased properties? Do we build affordable housing? Is there a need for affordable housing in Chatham-Kent?
Yes, there's an absolute great need of affordable housing, as the recent reports have shown, an escalating need and a growing wait list for affordable housing in the communities across Chatham-Kent, especially in Chatham, which is our greatest need.
Great, and the report that we had tonight that was in consent, I think, showed that the wait list for all rent geared to income housing is over 5 years. So I think that's important to note, and that list is up to 1,000 families in our community. And I think it's also important to note that people live in residential communities. That's what they're for. People that live in affordable housing or any type of housing live in residential communities. With respect to the price, have we tried to or looked at purchase of other school properties? And I'm thinking in particular the property on Lark, because I know it was listed for a certain price and had a very interesting history of sale and resale. And if we could maybe comment on, I don't need exact numbers, but approximate numbers on what happened to the value of that property?
Sure. I think Ray mentioned it real quickly, but just to be specific, so it was listed, I believe, at $750 or $775 by the school board. We did an appraisal and offered $910. With council direction, we did not even come close. It ended up selling for 1.6, and then shortly after that, it sold for 2.2. Size-wise, it's not quite double the size of this. I think it's about 4.5 acres. So ultimately, that was 2.2 million. So it's now owned by a private company. Hopefully, they'll have an interest in building affordable housing, but as we know, not a lot of people are necessarily in the business to be benevolent. So we'll see what happens, but at some point, we expect an application to come forward on that particular property. So we lost that one as a potential site for affordable housing, at least one, or supportive housing.
And this is a planning question. Based on the current planning or the zoning at that site, if this were to go to market, a developer to purchase it, what type of uses are permitted on that property right now? So what type of things could we see other than just run-of-the-mill regular housing? What type of institutions could be opened on that property?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. The property continues to be in an institutional zone, and this is most largely reflective of the previous use of it being an elementary school. So the private sector may propose under that zoning such uses as a retirement home, long-term care facility, a private club, or a clinic or a child care center, for example, or a supportive housing development. I think what's more important and what's probably more attractive to private investors is the underlying policy designation in Chatham-Kent's official plan at this property, which is residential. So right now, public policies in our official plan would support 75 units per hectare for an apartment building without an amendment to the official plan. That would simply be subject to a zoning bylaw amendment application. Thank you.
Great. So I hear that it could be used certainly for a higher density residential development than would currently be on it. I heard clinic uses as other possible options, and I think it's important to note that this property on the market could fetch a different price, could go to a different use. If we purchase it, we have that option to control what goes in this community, and I think that's important to note. I appreciate the work that's been done on this so far. Certainly appreciate the public input. Really appreciate the deputation, especially from Mr. Schultz. I know that he's done a lot of background into the previous zoning of this property and really has engaged, and I think that's a good example of great transparency and engagement in our community. I think that this makes sense to go forward with. I think that the number one thing we hear, feedback from the public, is we have a housing shortage, we have a homelessness issue, we have an extremely long wait for affordable housing. We need to control some options to build affordable housing, and this is one way that we can do it. So I'm supportive of this going forward, and I think that it meets a need in our community, and it's something that we should move forward with. Thank you. I'll bank that for later.
Councilor McGrail, followed by Councilor Scotchy.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Caniff. So I have a couple questions, right? In the last year, how many properties have we purchased as a municipality to down the line have projects to build our supportive and or affordable housing?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor. I'm not sure if the Vitesco property would count towards affordable housing, but we did purchase that property to enable to provide or develop affordable housing on the existing municipal land parcel. So that's that one that would come to mind. I don't know if that would qualify as an example that you would consider. And as well, I think that's it.
Just we've purchased one property.
I think we also, if I can, Your Worship, I think we also bought a property next to the
Yes.
cabin site.
Sorry. Yep.
Which
so
is intended to support housing as well. And then, well, obviously some of the discussions we've haven't been finalized yet, but there are other pieces of property that we're looking at. I would say at least 2 or 3 more, some that have come to council and closed, and at least 1 or 2 more that we expect to bring to council. Obviously, we can't discuss all of them publicly, but when we get to a point where we can, obviously we'll disclose that with the public.
Nope, that's good. So, and these sites will be purchased, so they're not municipal-owned sites at the moment. Like the sites we're talking about at this moment are purchased sites, not municipal-owned properties.
That's great, that we're purchasing them from somebody else.
Sure. So my next question is, how many municipal properties have we identified as sites, potential sites for projects going forward? Existing municipal properties.
I don't have that number here, but several sites were identified in the 2023 affordable housing update that was presented at the November 6th. I can get you that accurate number at a later
No, that's
time.
fair. That's fair. But we are using municipal sites is what
Yes,
we can say. Yes.
Absolutely. We are using municipal sites for future projects as well as ones that are currently under construction that are infill developments on our existing municipally owned sites.
Okay. So, and I asked these questions because as I was reading the report and in the comments, it says administration has been working on developing affordable housing throughout the municipality of Chatham-Kent, especially on municipal-owned and underutilized land parcels. So I struggle with this because I know there's lots of underused municipal sites that maybe we need to look a little bit more at and develop to become part of this whole project, because I do understand it, and I do very much believe that, you know, we are in a crisis, in a housing crisis, and I will support you all the time. And I do. I give you all my information, my Roma, everything I can do to help, I pass along for sure. I'm just not sure that buying the site, and let's be clear, it says supportive and or affordable housing, right? I know we talked about, you know, it's up to you guys what you want to do with it, but you know, tonight we're talking about, to me, buying a piece of land for supportive and or affordable housing. That's what it says up there, to be clear. That I think there's more land that we maybe could utilize within the municipality to help, not to completely eradicate, because that would be awesome, but I'm not sure we can do that, and to move forward with existing sites that we already have. And then the second piece really quickly is that if this is an investment, and you know, sometimes with investments, you know, we give an offer and sometimes we win and sometimes we lose, but we have to understand that this is, you know, community money that we're paying. And I agree that that $400,000 difference, I'm not sure. We all, you know, I bought stuff and I've invested and I put money in, and sometimes you sell things, you know, and you don't get all your money back, right? Closing costs, like it is true. So I think that I wish well, like definitely. I wish, you know, them that they get their money back, but I'm not sure. And I don't know. We don't know those numbers, complete numbers of what was in it. But I'm not sure giving them a little bit of a capital gain is in, you know, something that Chatham-Kent, as citizens of Chatham-Kent, we should do for Endwell. I think they should get their money back. And when I say that, it's the purchase, you know, it's not overhead costs that a normal individual or company would incur while owning a piece of land. Thank you.
You took Brock's 11 seconds, so it's used up. All right. Councillor Scotchy, followed by Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Councillor McGregor mentioned some of mine, but just one quickly to Mr. Jacques. Ryan, how much control does the municipality have if it's bought by a separate entity, if it follows any other of the things that you mentioned? Essentially, will this come back to council if somebody says we want to put a 75-bed supportive housing there? Will this have to come back for council for any type of zoning amendment or anything like that? Or just with the new bill that's in place, any site amendments, or can it simply just proceed now that it's got the new zoning designation?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Thanks, Councillor, for the question. To the specific example of if a private developer were to move forward with a 75-room supportive housing development, that's what is approved now for the site. So a developer would simply apply for the technical site plan approval and could begin construction on such a project.
Yep.
In general, the municipality council has control over land use through the regulations in the zoning bylaw. Those are strong regulations, however, those are subject to appeal by the property owner, and the Ontario Land Tribunal is the final arbiter in terms of an appeal, but provided there are no appeals, council does have control over land use.
So to summarize, if an investor from Toronto wanted to put a 70-unit supportive housing there, they could do so without coming back to council basically at all.
That's correct.
So what we're doing by this, I hear a lot of talk about supportive housing and saying that we're not supportive. At the end of the day, if we purchase it, we make that decision if it's supportive housing or not. It's not a third-party entity that's buying a piece of property and investing in the community, because at the end of the day, the neighborhood may potentially have zero say. If we purchase this property, we're at least allowing them to have their thoughts and their processes heard, because at the end of the day, I know that our goal is not to get into supportive housing. I guess where my challenge becomes is that some of the statements towards administration and some of the comments, and I say this respectfully, it's almost like a grilling in some components. But when we went back in June of 2023, we went through our strategic planning of council, and not one of these comments were mentioned in that strategic planning of council, which is right in front of us. Explore incentives for all types of housing, prepare municipally owned properties for future funding, partner with nonprofits for affordable housing, use surplus properties for housing first, launch a Yes in My Backyard campaign. All I'm saying is it's really relatively easy. Either we decide to not task administration to do these things and bring it back because we have no interest, and we take it off of our strategic plan, or we support what we've said through those long exercises of what we're going to do. And I think the reason why I do support this in some mechanisms is because this does allow us to achieve something and have the neighborhood's interest at, maybe it's senior housing. Gord, last question to you, because I'm going to wrap it short, because somebody probably took the other 3 minutes that I'll leave, is if we buy this property for $1 million in $1.005 million, and let's say there is an investor that wants to come in and purchase this property from us because they want to do residential, are we able to sell that money and turn a profit, and then put that money into other areas of the community or other areas of our affordable housing portfolio?
Yes, once council owns the property, council can make the decision on what to do with the property. The suggestion in 6 is that we investigate supportive and affordable housing and come back with a report, come back with a report early in the year. But if council didn't like what comes in that report, doesn't want to move forward, we could put it on the market. I'm pretty confident that we would get our money back.
Yeah, and then just lastly, Jody, maybe to yourself or to Ray, whoever, or to Michael, and I'm not going to reference the report, I'm just going to ask, I guess I'll go to yourself. Do you feel, because you've done a very good job with us so far, you have a track record of doing some pretty good things. I don't want to toot your own horn publicly too much, because we still want to keep you sharp, but does this check off all the boxes that we sent you guys on a mission to do when it comes to looking at properties and that? Or do you think that this is a wild goose chase that we should just say no on?
Well, look, I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the kind words too. At this point in time, all we're doing is acquiring property. And it's property that is zoned and serviced. The challenge we have is we do not have a lot of service land. And if you think this is expensive, when we identify certain properties that are vacant in this community that are serviced but are brownfields, and we come back and tell you how much it's going to cost to clean those up, you'll be really surprised, right? And so this ticks off a lot of boxes in the sense that, A, it certainly ticks off. We bring these forward because you give us direction through your strategic plan. So I really appreciate you saying that. If you say no, we'll go on to the next file. That's what we do, right? We don't take it personally. I want members of the public to know that too. It's not a personal thing for us. Just the direction you guys gave us is to pursue these things. I will say there will be other properties, but they too will have their challenges. There will be residents who don't like what you want to do there. There may be other issues with the property. There may be some zoning, concerns as well. I think this is, at least puts the property in your hands, and then you have control over what you do with it. I think control is very important. I'm not a control freak, but from the standpoint of you guys making decisions, having control over this is very important. And I know the public is worried, but you've got to trust that your councillors are going to do the right thing for the community. And at least you have a say, at least you can come here. There is no forum, as you said, for the private sector if they decide to do something with the property. There are many properties that we're looking at. I know in the past, I think it was Councillor Bondi who said we don't buy properties. He's right. We never used to. Municipalities didn't go buying properties, but municipalities also didn't have this burden of dealing with housing shortages in their community. The feds are not doing it for us. The province is not doing it for us. Unfortunately, you guys are being asked to do it. And so working out ways of picking up schools, or at least properties that are zoned and are owned by other entities that aren't necessarily looking to make money off of it, is really helpful. Sometimes you're going to have to pay a little bit of money. So that's about it. I think it does tick off many boxes, and all I will say to you is that if you support it and you change your mind, you can sell it. And in this community, we have seen property values, despite the challenges economically, we've seen property values continue to rise. Some developer will come along and pay money for it, and as you said, you can use the revenue for other sources.
Thank you, and you just said it perfectly. If we buy it and we sell it, the last thing I hate to see for the community is that somebody externally buys this from a different place and they do whatever they want on there and there's no feedback permitted. Mayor Caniff holds me to the 5-minute rule, so I will cut my comments now because I'm probably like 5:17, not 17:05.
Councillor Crew, followed by Councillor Harrigan, then Councillor Anderson, then Councillor Hall. Anybody else? I'm going to cut the list off. Going once, going twice. All right, so we've got 4 more speakers. Thanks.
All right, and I think some of my 5 minutes is going to be really dwindled down thanks to Councillor McGregor and Councillor Sakachi, because I'm sure they were looking over my shoulder here. I really wanted to talk about our priorities, but thank you, Councillor Sakachi. One thing, by buying this property, this removes one of the barriers. This is a shovel-ready property that we can apply to the feds in the province for funding if it comes available, because that is a barrier. If you don't have shovel-ready property, you're just not even considered for the money that we need for our community for housing. I got a lot of notes here, but I'm going to really, Mr. Mayor, cut it down. Private sale. The good thing would be if somebody used it, but they can just let it sit there until Mr. Lacina's called for property standard issues, and if the buildings only has to be maintained to the minimum property standard, correct? So it doesn't have to look like something very nice for your neighborhood. So you can end up with a lot of different things in your community. Others in that area do support this housing. So I appreciate that you're here and giving us your point of view, but there are others that have contacted me with their point of view, and they support affordable housing and supportive housing in their communities. So in that area. So I just want you to know that there are other people there. And, maybe we should save ourselves some trouble. Maybe we should just put something out there and just say, who wants this in their neighborhood? We've got affordable housing and supportive housing that we need a place for. You know what you're going to hear? Crickets. That's what you're going to hear. Because no one wants people of this income in their community. Because Lord knows crime will come and everything else that comes with poor people. So before I run out of time, Mr. Mayor, is there a motion on the floor yet? Madam Clerk?
Yes. Moved by Councillor Bondi and seconded by Councillor Doyle.
Okay. For this? Okay, thank you. No, you can have my time at the end, Mr. Mayor. These guys took it.
Counselor Harrigan, followed by Counselor Anderson.
I'll take it. No, I'm kidding. I actually just have a couple of questions through to our CFO. I'm in supportive of the recommendations, but I did want to clarify a few things. First, there was a written deputation, and I also believe I heard comments on the floor noting that we've given Indwell $10 million. And I would just like to clarify that because I believe that 9.7 million that was referenced was never actually funded. It was never budgeted because we didn't meet the parameters. So I would like to clarify or confirm that with our CFO.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that was just that that a letter to the federal government along with that grant application saying if they came through with the funding that the province would, I think it was federal level, I guess, if the feds came through with the money, then we would consider putting $9.7 million in our budget. And, we might have issued a debenture like I talked about earlier today and spread that over 20 years or whatever we would have planned on. Since that didn't go forward, our multi-year, this happened prior to last November, so our multi-year budget did not include funding any of the 9.7 million. So there is no reserve with 9.7 earmarked for this project.
Great, thank you. And then a follow-up question. Also, we received in some of our written deputations, why this location, why buy it from Indwell when we know there could be other, especially schools, coming out on the market with some of the recent infrastructure that's being built in Chatham-Kent. Can you also comment on that, Gordon? I think it's been alluded to, but my thought is we're kind of in the market for yes to both in terms of when it comes to need across the community. So I was just hoping you can also comment on that.
Yeah, I don't think I can talk on specific properties, but in general, through the strategic plan that Councillor Sakachi went through, we are looking at a lot of different properties for potential affordable housing use, including school board surplus properties.
Yeah, and I have a fear that if we see a closed session report around purchasing one of those closed session properties, we might say something like 1.4. Well, we just bought another school for just $1 million. Why is it now $400,000 more? And that's because the valuation of these properties are continuing to rise. And so I just wanted to ask those questions because it did seem in some of the conversations, and I think Councillor Jubenville alluded to this too, that it was really transactional between us and Indwell. And I don't think that that's what we're talking about. We're really talking about safe places for people to have supportive and affordable housing in alignment with our strategic plan and values. And so for the same reason that residents might choose to live in a neighborhood near a park and a school, like what we see with this is also reasons why we as council should be choosing these places for supportive and affordable housing, because they are great neighborhoods for everybody to live in and to create community. I do think, and I will say that as a council, I think it would be really valuable to have maybe a special session or an education session mapping those potential areas for supportive and affordable housing. I think that integrating those housing types all across neighborhoods has been proven to be really effective. And so to have that conversation and to see that visual would be really helpful for us, and also to achieve the yes in my backyard mentality that we're trying to achieve, and also to kind of avoid big, large-scale units in one single place and to really think about building community. That's what I think about when I think about that vision where everyone has a safe place to call home in Chatham-Kent. So it's about building community, and this is a step towards building community. Also, as an aside, it didn't get a lot of attention, but the little gymnasium and the potential revenue generation for some indoor volleyball or basketball around the gymnasium while we're waiting and figuring out is also a need that is in Chatham-Kent that we see with a lot of community groups. So that's also a great potential. So those are all the comments that I have that I think were maybe less discussed, but I do think that this is important, and I do think that it is a good investment. It's a good investment for the control that we have, for meeting our strategic plan. And as much as it might hurt to think about the transactional back and forth between ourselves and Indwell and what that looked like, I don't know if that's productive. It's about purchasing and what that value is for our community today. So those are all my comments and questions, Mayor Caniff. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Anderson, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of timeline questions. So
say we go through with this, what would be the timeline for like the 200,000, like estimated $200,000 like demo? Like how soon would we do that?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor, for your question. I'm not certain of the timeline it would take to demolish the school. I know that we got some cost estimations. I didn't receive the timelines on what that would take. I would definitely be able to bring that back to you once we got that more detailed information.
Would you say that it would be fairly soon that we would be able to do that?
I would assume yes. I don't know if Edward would be able to help. Sorry to put you on the spot, Edward, and know what that could look like in terms of.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It could probably happen this year sometime, yeah.
Okay, thank you. My next question is, how long would it be before administration would come back to us with possible like suggestions for this site?
Thank you for your question. So we're targeting early 2025 with those options and recommendations for council's consideration.
Thank you. And then after that, there would be community involvement. It would go to tender. If there was an appeal because of the community involvement, all of that could delay time, correct?
Depending on the projects and what council wanted to foresee, there could be different timelines and on those approaches.
Thank you.
Well, if I can, the only thing I'll add to is the upper levels of government. I think it was Councillor Crew that said we need shovel-ready projects. A number of us are going to AMO every year. They always have some sort of announcement at AMO. Hopefully this year it'll be about funding for housing, that we can all hope, right? And so if that happens, rest assured we will have to accelerate things because, as Councillor Crew said, this particular government is always giving funding based on shovel-ready projects. I suspect it's probably because they want to dole out the money and get recognition for it, and I don't begrudge them that, especially if it's going to benefit our community. But we would accelerate the timelines if, in fact, we had to meet some sort of a funding application deadline.
Thank you. I guess I just know like nothing happens very quickly in politics, and I'm wondering if it was a private investor, if maybe things would be able to move a little bit faster. And, I do echo what Councillor McGrail said about us having, some underutilized municipal properties already. And ultimately, if we're looking at spending $1.2 million, I wonder the benefit instead of purchasing a property if we were to actually take that $1.2 million and really put it at the source of the problem, which is in mental health, addiction, substance disorders, and some trauma resolution therapy for these people. And I can't imagine how far $1.2 million would go actually really helping these people. Because it doesn't matter how much housing we give, if they aren't fixing the root of the problem, this problem is just going to continue. And I think that we have other properties that we could utilize and look at developing, and I think that I'm not in favor of this for that reason.
Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I'll keep it very short, but Councillor, I want to thank Councillor Zakachi, Councillor Crew for bringing up exactly what I was going to bring up, and Councillor Harrigan as well. This is right in line with our council term priorities. We talked about our strategic plan. It's right in front of us. I think I appreciate Mr. Dubin's answers to the questions and things talking about that. So I just want to thank everybody for bringing that up. I think Michael's right. This checks off a lot of these boxes, and I just want to applaud staff for bringing this and following that direction that we decided, to do strategically as a council and as a group. So thank you for following that direction that we've given you and given us these options. And I think we had some good dialogue tonight, but I'm absolutely happy to support it this evening and look forward to more coming to the table. Thank you.
All right, with that, I think we've set a record at council for the longest discussion, which is great. We've had some very healthy discussion, and I think we heard from almost everybody. So with that, it's time to vote.
All votes are in. Motion passes 10-7.
Okay, we will go to closed session reports. Councillor Crew, and then I can have Councillor Thompson second.
Scribbled all over it, so bear with me. Council received information on litigation and advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege regarding properties in Tilbury, Section 239(2) E and F of the Municipal Act 2001. I so move.
I feel like I should take up my 5 minutes I didn't use on the last debate. But I won't. I'll second it.
Any questions? Seeing none, we'll put it vote.
See, push the wrong button.
All votes are in. Motion passes 17-0.
Non-agenda business, Councillor Story.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I have 3 items that I promise I will try and keep short in light of our timing. There is a resolution from the Association of Municipalities of Ontario that they've sent around to our member municipalities asking for support leading into their conference next week, basically to summarize, just reviewing the stability and sustainability of municipal finances. As you can see, it's quite long, so I appreciate we probably don't need to read it all the way through, but it's basically asking for councils across Ontario to support AMO working with the province to look at the sustainability of our finances, which we talked about at basically every issue tonight. So,
Can I get a seconder for that, Councillor B. McGregor? Any questions? Seeing none, anyone opposed? We're gonna write that one up. Next one.
thank you. This one is a little more challenging, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak, and I'll end up with a better news story. I know Councillor Sakachi mentioned that the other meeting, but I wanted to share something that I was asked to share from some stakeholders. Last week I was on my way back from a funeral in Eastern Ontario, and I started receiving calls, emails, and online messages from a variety of people about a radio segment with a private developer who has an interest in the downtown proposal. During this interview, there was a variety of misinformation shared. The feedback I got, it was generally offensive, inappropriate, and divisive behavior by an individual that we were supposed to be community partners with. This individual's ongoing, inappropriate, and bullying behavior towards me personally, towards my family, towards this council, and towards staff is something I hope we will be dealing with separately as an organization. Councillor Crew spoke not that long ago around this horseshoe about the treatment of councillors and attempts to intimidate by those who may not agree with questions we ask on behalf of the taxpayer or votes that we make as elected officials. Councillor Crew and others have spoken very eloquently here about the importance of respectful behavior and its importance to our democratic process. I won't go into additional comments on that tonight. But I cannot let the insult and misinformation shared about the Chatham-Kent Public Library go unchallenged. As a library board member, as an accessibility advisory committee member, but more as a lifelong user of the Chatham branch, I know this library system well, and I know this particular library branch very well, and I'd just like to share a few stats about the library, about its position of excellence, both locally and across the province. You may recall last fall we heard from Tanya Sharp, the previous CEO, about the successful accreditation of this library. But the Ontario Public Library Association Council, this was a substantial goal for the CKPL staff to undertake, and they were successful. Only 11% of the over 300 public libraries across Ontario have achieved this impressive accreditation. People who have library cards in Chatham-Kent represent 2 of 3 Chatham-Kent households. So when you insult the library, you are insulting tens of thousands of users of the library, the amazing staff of the library, and everyone associated with this phenomenal library system. Anyone who has ever spent time in our Chatham branch or any of our library branches would never describe it the way it was described last week. The library is, in a word, amazing. The programs at the library help kids learn how to read, how to get better grades, how to find a job, how to write a resume, how to access the internet. It's also in an architecturally significant building designed by Doug Hanley. Our library is downtown. Our library staff have the biggest hearts and often see the most challenging things every single day that thankfully most of us will never have to experience, yet they keep showing up. They are understaffed and quite often overworked, but they keep welcoming our library users with a warm smile. They are kind, they are compassionate, they go out of their way to help you. I firmly believe now more than ever as a library board member that our library system saves lives. It is a refuge, it is a haven, it is a safe space to stay warm, to cool off, and it is accessible to all. So if you want a true community hub, our library is the true community hub, and I want to apologize to everyone who was hurt by those remarks last week. And last but not least, on a much different, lighter note, I wanted to congratulate, I don't know if anyone else is going through Olympics watching withdrawal, but I wanted to congratulate all the Olympians from Chatham-Kent, and I apologize if I'm missing anyone, maybe someone else can chime in, but Bridget Carlton from Chatham, Nick Wamis from Bothwell, and Chris Von Martels from Ridgetown. Huge congratulations to all of you for representing our country and our community so well. I loved watching this Olympics. It was such an exciting and fantastic 10 days. Thank you, Mayor Caniff.
All right, got Councillor Harrigan, followed by Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I do have a question directed to our Chief Building Officer, just to ask about a status update on the demolition site that's happening right now at Queen Street in Tilbury, which is one of our main community roads. In addition to the update, I just want to share that members of the public have expressed grave concerns about the length of time that Tilbury's been experiencing the demolition, and specifically speaking to the poor image that it has as a bit of a stain on our downtown. Residents have asked about the opportunity to tarp or barrier the fencing so that it may be improve visibility or to clean up the bricks. Second, accessibility issues for wheelchair or stroller walkers to get access around the barriers. And then third, signage and traffic visibility issues. So I'm just wondering if we can get an update on the demolition site and if you might be able to speak to some of those public concerns.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, and thank you, Councillor Harrigan, for the question. As we all know, the demolition started last year in November, and unfortunately during the demolition process, we uncovered some existing structural defects of the adjacent buildings, and as such we had to put orders on the 2 remaining buildings. We, the municipality, have been working with all parties since November of last year and all through as of up to July. We expect that the citizens of Tilbury will see some action of increased activity on the site. Unfortunately, the buildings that are remaining need to be stabilized before we can continue on the demolition. Unfortunately, I expect that they'll see this into October, November before hopefully we can continue. If you don't mind, your other questions, please?
Yep, so the 3 issues were the poor image that the site has around the downtown core, accessibility for wheelchair and stroller users, and then signage and traffic concerns.
Okay, perhaps I'll do the second and third one. I reached out to Public Works, and we're going to reach out to traffic as well to attend the site to see if we can provide more accessibility around the site while still providing the safety to the public. We also will look at increased signage, and if needs to be, so there's early warning, either for the pedestrians coming on up and down Queen Street or from Superior Street. As for the screening, the site is very limited. As anyone going by, you can see lots of debris on the sidewalk. Because of the instability of the buildings, any removal of that debris or getting near that debris could cause further damage to the existing buildings. So we will, I'll take that back with my team as well as engineering and see if there's anything that we can do to minimize the effect.
Great, thank you so much for that update, and appreciate that it has been a very complicated and complex situation, but I was pleased to hear in an update that you have provided our BIA that there has been progress week over week and month over month with regards to the issue, so thank you for that.
Councillor Hall, followed by Councillor Finn.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just wanted to tell council that we had a great weekend in Wallaceburg this weekend with our annual Wambo festivities. It got off to an amazing start on Friday when our walking bridge, which was on the agenda earlier today, opened up for the weekend. So that made, I know, hundreds of people, if not thousands, that came through, very happy to be able to go across the bridge again. So we had a great event. The Sydenham River was packed with boats. The downtown James Street was packed with cars, and lots of food vendors and entertainment with our new municipal stage as well, which was right downtown Wallaceburg, which looked great. So just hats off to everyone involved with the committee. There's a lot of work that goes on all year long to prepare, but definitely a lot of hard work throughout the weekend to pull it off. Also, I just, sharing some information from our chair. He just wants to say hats off to Chatham-Kent overall. I won't name names because I'll probably forget somebody, but, everyone with staff and administration was very receptive and helpful leading up to the event, and we're there to help, and they just wanted to say that publicly and thank everyone with Chatham-Kent. So, thank you.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor B. McGregor.
Thank you, Worship. Just like to mention a couple of local athletes, not Olympians yet, but definitely on the road too. Caleb Roberts won a gold medal with Team Ontario at the Canadian Under-17 boys basketball Saturday in Toronto. He helped Team Ontario go undefeated and he was second highest scorer on the team, averaging 11.2 points per game, which is very impressive. And also Chatham's Brooke Bentley won a bronze medal at the Royal Canadian Legion Youth Track and Field Championship, which was held in Calgary. She participated in both the hammer and shot put, winning bronze in the under-18 shot put. So congratulations.
Councillor B. McGregor, followed by Councillor Jubenville.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Just wanted to let everyone know, remind everyone, I suppose, that this is Pride Week in Chatham-Kent, so really appreciate seeing some of the Pride stickers around the horseshoe today. There's already been a couple of events. There was a great semi-kickoff today with the flag raising out front of the Civic Center here. Extraordinarily well attended, really fantastic to see that event grow over the past number of years. And if you're interested in participating in more of the events this week, they're listed on Let's Talk Chatham-Kent. One event of note is the Pride Parade this coming Saturday. There'll be a municipal entry. It starts just outside the Civic Center here, so anyone that would like to join is more than welcome. And anyone from the community that would like to join is more than welcome to dot the route or come and walk in the parade. Thank you.
Councillor Jubenville, followed by Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple things. I just feedback on the Let's Talk survey regarding the community hub. Quite a few people reached out to me to just let me know that they felt that the survey was a little biased and pointed. With that being said, I am just curious as to when council will receive the results from the Let's Talk survey, and will it be coming back to us before the community hub comes back to us in October?
Thank you. Through the mayor, the intent is really to bring the results of the community consultation all back together in one report to council. As you know, the design has been out there through the public consultation and the PIC. I believe we have one more meeting of the stakeholder engagement group, and then we'd be coming back to council sometime in the fall, most likely in October. So all that will be summarized in one report.
Okay, thank you. Another item that has come to my attention from constituents, there is an amount of $11,780,340 that was brought forward to us in a previous report regarding the community hub, that if we utilize the existing Sears building as it is, that we will save this amount of money, the $11,780,000. To be honest, the people that are asking me, I can't even answer them because there's so many reports surrounding all of this. It's very confusing. I guess my question is, how will the municipality save $11,780,340 by keeping the Sears building shell and retrofitting it for the community hub? So I'm just looking for a more detailed explanation versus what was in the report because it was kind of vague. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll try to really simplify this. If you were to build a new building, you would have to bring in servicing. You would have to build foundations. You would have to build a floor slab. You'd have to build walls. You'd have to build a roof. We're not doing that. As part of this project, we are utilizing that building and saving $11 million because all of those assets are already in place. So if you built it brand new, you would spend $11 million building those assets that I talked about. So you're reusing the shell of the building because it has walls, it has floors, it has an elevator, it has servicing, underground, water and wastewater, all of those sort of aspects. So if you built it new, it's actually spending $11 million more. So that's the simplest answer.
Okay, are those actuals or estimates, those figures?
Those were estimates by a cost estimator that we had hired at the time.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to bring something to everyone's attention that's hopefully watching. There is, the municipality is completing a council structure and ward boundary review. Since this is posted on our website and on our Facebook, but I just thought I'd bring it here too, just to remind everybody, because I think this is very important. Since there has not been any change in the ward boundaries or the council composition since amalgamation, and we all know that Chatham-Kent has grown in size and population. So just to reiterate, the municipality is hosting 2 public engagement sessions at the John D. Bradley Center, where CK residents can provide input and feedback. And the dates are August 22nd and August 28th, both from 6 to 8 p.m., and both in the meeting room at the John D. Bradley Center. And there will also be a Let's Talk survey that will go live on August 22nd. And lastly, I was just wondering if Jody would be able to provide just a high-level, I guess a report or about the encampment issue, because we all know that it's changing daily and a lot of people are concerned and asking questions about it.
Thank you, Councillor, for your question. Through you, Mr. Mayor. I can let you know that we are on target to bring a report back to Council in September, outlining, I guess I'll call them some rules around the encampments and where they can be, those kinds of things. I can also let you know that we are just about ready to launch a Let's Talk CK page. We are looking for some feedback from residents and from businesses that we can use to inform the report that we bring back to council. That should be launched by the end of this week, and I would invite all residents to go online and to complete that survey. So next month we'll be bringing back a report for you with additional information.
Thanks for the update, Jody.
Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is just the last meeting before the further exploration of the Wheatley site is scheduled to happen on September the 3rd. So I just wanted to give a big thank you to Chief Case and also Associate Chief Woods for their emergency planning process and getting everything in place, going door to door and seeing residents within the 50 and 100 meter radius to do some teaching of potential things that they could expect to hear and see and smell, and what the emergency response would be depending on what is found. I also wanted to thank Teresa Watson for coming down last week and meeting with the public and also other residents to have further discussions with them, as she's the expert that's going to be running the show at this site. I'm very optimistic, along with most people within the community, that we are definitely at the end of this very, very, very long, dark tunnel. And we're happy to know now that this site is very, very secure as is. It can stay like this forever. It may change what we could do as far as urban planning goes at that site, but it's definitely able to stay as is. My hope is actually that Teresa Watson takes the full 1 month to be here and that they actually do find the source and are able to bring in the big rigs that are going to be super loud and super bright and absolutely drive us all crazy for however long they have to be there. But I definitely hope that that is the end result, and that this site is completely remediated. But if not, I'm happy to know that everything has been done that can be done to make sure that our village of Wheatley is safe. And I want to further express my thanks to administration and to council for continuing to be 100% unanimously supportive of us all. Thank you.
Okay, there was just one little thing I wanted to add as well. I meant to bring this last council meeting, but from the OBCM meeting we had here in Chatham-Kent, received a lot of rave reviews from mayors. And I'll just read one card that I got here from the Deputy Mayor of Toronto. It said, Mayor Caniff, thank you for hosting OBCM and for your amazing hospitality. I've been raving about your community. It's such a gem. Many thanks. So these are some of the feedback we're getting, and we're getting more and more discovered. And the OBCM meeting here was certainly opened a lot of eyes because a lot of people had never been here, including the Deputy Mayor of Toronto. So just wanted on a nice note there. And with that, we'll go to the first and
So moved.
So seconded.
anyone opposed? Motion carried. Third and final reading, Councillor Juveville and Councillor Sakachi. Can I get you to move that, please?
So moved?
Absolutely moved. Seconded.
Anyone opposed? Motion carried. Okay, the resolution of council, and Councillor Anderson, can I have you wrap it up?
I move that Chatham-Kent Council adjourn to its next meeting to be held on Monday, September 9th, 2024, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. I so move.
And I so second.
It's official, 9:48. Thanks, everyone.